Hey friends! Glad to see you on my channel. If you enjoy my content and want to support the channel, there's a PayPal link in the profile description. You can make a small contribution to treat me to a cup of tea. Thank you for your support. Let's get into the video. Spring was warm, the sun was warming the earth, and everything around was blooming. March had arrived, and after the cold winter, a warm spring breeze was blowing. There were many first-year students at the university. It was that time when campus romance was at its peak. It was the perfect time for excitement and nervousness. But among all the others, there was one person who wasn't thinking about romance. "Damn, it's her," one of the girls said, seeing her heading towards the academic building. There are always such people around, at least one. They always stood out in the crowd. Everyone paid attention to them. It's the one with the cap. She was the one they had already talked about. That's the upperclassman who was obsessed with her ex. She was a person with a bad reputation. Someone no one was happy to see. Has she really recovered? It was hard to recognize her. Yi-hyun noticed that these two girls were definitely talking about her. How did one of the girls recognize her, since she thought she had changed so much since then? She recognized her because they were in the same course in their first year, so the girl clearly remembered her face. The other girl was surprised. Could it really be true that they were in the same course? But it was indeed true. They still remembered her face. It was obvious that she had changed a lot. They remembered that she used to have long hair. They guessed that it was better not to meet her and walk down another path. Bowing her head, she was walking without seeing the road ahead and accidentally bumped into the guy. He asked if she was okay, picked up her cap from the floor. The girl apologized, saying it was her fault for not looking where she was going. For a moment, it seemed like she knew that voice. The guy looked at her and with difficulty recognized Yi-hyun. He asked if it was really her, as he remembered her with long hair. Could she go back to university? They hadn't seen each other in a long time, and the connection between them had been broken. The girl felt awkward. She didn't know what to say. She snatched her cap from his hands and saw no other option but to quickly run away. She wanted to run without stopping, as this meeting was unwanted and brought unpleasant emotions. The girl already thought it was time to stop. She was far enough from him, and she no longer had the strength to keep running. One question kept repeating in her head. Why? Why the hell was he still here? She thought that by the time she returned to her studies, he would no longer be around. Who was this guy she didn't want to see? He was the main subject of all the rumors about her trashy ex-boyfriend. Because of him, she had a bad reputation throughout the university, and everyone talked about her, no matter who they were. She hated the judgment and conversations of all the students. She wanted to run away as far as possible, not hear or see anything. Ehan remembered standing in front of him and asking what she had done wrong. But he didn't respond. He didn't even want to talk to her. She begged him, and he told her that she didn't understand what was really going on. He claimed that nothing had happened, but somehow avoided her. Everyone looked at her with judgment, saying she was obsessed with him, not believing that something like that could have happened. Everyone around was whispering, didn't they break up? Why is she acting like this, as if she's lost her mind and doesn't understand her own behavior? Yi-hyun herself didn't know she had such a character. She never imagined she could be so persistent, acting irrationally over a guy. The mention of it upset her. Such unpleasant memories took her back to the horrible time when she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The lesson had already begun, and the professor was taking attendance to check who was present in his class. Professor intended to mark her as absent. She realized the professor didn't recognize her, so she raised her hand and said she was present, just hadn't heard when he called her name. The man grumbled that next time she should respond on time, or he would mark her as absent. She apologized and understood. Ehan noticed that everyone was paying attention to her. They started whispering about her. These conversations about her were unpleasant as they brought up her past. Some started pointing at her and whispering, wondering if it was true that she would now be in the same class as them. Was the judgment and gossip about her personal life starting again? She wanted to return as someone new, without the memories of her ex and reminders of her past state. The girl tried not to pay attention, but the strange looks were everywhere. One of the guys smirked and said that girls could sometimes be obsessive and psychotic. At the same time, another guy couldn't take his eyes off her, not even trying to hide that he was staring at her. His friend wondered why he was staring at her. Was she really attractive to him? He responded that no. He was just curious to look at her because he had heard her story so many times. He didn't notice anything unusual in her behavior. She seemed calm, even a little shy. After the class, everyone was heading home, hoping to meet again next week. They planned to go for lunch and then quickly head home because there were many tasks to complete over the weekend. Some of the upperclassmen still had one more class they had to attend. Yi-hyun saw that there were many students around. She wanted to leave as quickly as possible and not be noticed by them. She put on her glasses and pulled the cap low over her eyes. She thought she looked inconspicuous and could leave without anyone noticing her. When she passed by her classmates, she simply didn't notice them. She was in such a hurry to leave that she accidentally tripped over one of their feet. The girl thought she was about to fall and draw everyone's attention again. But suddenly, one of them helped her, as she almost fell. He held her firmly by the shoulder with his large hand. He asked if she was okay. She didn't look him in the eye and said she was fine, thanking him for helping her. Yi-hyun shyly smiled. The guy apologized, saying that his legs were too long while his friend silently studied her. The girl felt embarrassed. She didn't want to attract any more attention, so she hurried to leave. She thought that over time, all the rumors would fade, and when she returned after recovering, she would be able to study peacefully. But those hopes turned out to be in vain. Everything that happened today continued right where it had left off. As she was leaving, the girl wondered why these guys kept staring at her. It made her feel uncomfortable. She tried to leave the university courtyard as quickly as possible, as she felt more at peace outside its gates. Yi-hyun walked, but her mind was full of all the glances and conversations about her life. Why couldn't they talk about something else? She didn't want to study at all anymore. She just wanted to disappear, to not be seen by anyone. Was it all over? Would she not be able to finish her studies? Would she never be able to interact with students again? Even now, it was very difficult. She was afraid to imagine what would happen next. The girl needed to get through this year, but she didn't know how to do it. She was sure she couldn't endure it for long. And why the hell was that jerk still studying at the university? She thought he would disappear from her life. When the girl met him again, she realized that he hadn't changed and nothing was resolved. The cycle was repeating itself. Finally, she was home where she could rest alone, away from strange glances and judgment from others. She needed to take a bath and relax a bit. Her head was heavy and tired from all her thoughts. At home, the girl was finally able to take off the cap and glasses she had worn at university to avoid drawing attention. Her phone rang. Her mom, who was worried about her, wanted to check in and see how she was doing. Holding the phone in her hand, she didn't know what to say to her mom when she asked about her day at the university. In the end, the girl answered the phone call from her mom. Her mom asked if she had already had dinner, how things were with her dorm room, and if she had a roommate. A week ago, when she arrived at the dorm, she didn't know what to do. Now, everything seemed to have worked out, but her mom still didn't know what had happened or where she was living. When she first arrived at the dorm, she was told that there were no available rooms. They didn't explain why, just refused her, and she was left out on the street. The dorm administrator apologized and smiled, saying that she would put her at the top of the list for the next semester. She was confused because she didn't know where she would stay that night. She had to hurriedly find a place to stay. By chance, she found the last available room in a guest house. That's what happened to her last week. She knew her mom would worry, so she didn't want to share all the details about where she was living. She told her that nothing had happened and everything was fine. The woman felt like her daughter was withholding anything, but Yi-hyun said that her roommate had arrived and that she would call her later. She quickly ended the call. Her mom's concern about her condition felt suffocating and annoying. That was close, she thought. She didn't want to worry her mom for no reason. She remembered that she hadn't checked the university chat in a long time. Moda is the university app where all the news and announcements for students are published. Wow, she hadn't checked Moda for so long. After opening it, she saw many interesting messages. She wanted to go through all the messages that had been posted in the chat and read all the comments under them. Everything had changed since then. As she reread the messages, she was surprised. Could it be that she didn't know so much and hadn't understood it? The last post was from a girl who was looking for the guy she accidentally bumped into and liked. From the description, Ehan realized it was someone from her faculty, but for some reason, there were a lot of negative comments about this guy. She just hated it when rumors were spread. She thought it was unfair to her and to the other people involved in the conflicts. They were discussing it but didn't even know whether it was true or false. The story with her ex wasn't over, as it seemed. Since her return to the university, she was once again the topic of everyone's conversations. If only someone had believed her back then, there wouldn't have been such a dramatic ending. Ehan put on a warm jacket and decided to go to the store. She no longer wanted to be associated with the trash. She needed to stay away from all of that. Luckily, the store was nearby. She didn't need to walk far. But it was still important to be cautious, as walking alone in the evening wasn't safe. The girl made all her purchases and quickly headed home. Wishing everyone well and a good night, she hurried out of the store. There was almost no one on the street, only someone at the corner barely moving. She stopped to see what had happened. Could it be someone drunk or someone feeling unwell? The guy was standing with his back to her. She wanted to check if he needed help. It was already 2 a.m. Definitely not the time for a walk. It was very late, and it could be dangerous, but she was still curious to see if he was okay. Ehan was thinking about whether to help or just walk past. She was afraid to approach him because it might be dangerous for her. After thinking for a bit, she decided to approach the stranger. She shyly tugged at the stranger's jacket and asked if he was okay. When she saw who it was, she was very surprised. Then she noticed that the guy was kissing a girl she hadn't spotted right away because of his large frame. The couple stood there, hugging, and the guy gave Ehan an irritated glance, silently asking what the hell she wanted. Then he sighed, smirking to himself. The guy suddenly looked at his companion, gently stroking her face, and said that it had been quite nice, asking if she liked it. Ehan froze, her face draining of color in horror as she realized she had once again found herself in an awkward situation. The road to the university wasn't long, but she really didn't want to go there. Yesterday, she was so embarrassed. After returning to the university, you never know what you'll see. All she could do was be surprised and get used to this kind of life. Could that guy really act like that in public? She kept thinking about what she had seen and couldn't forget it. She was almost at the university. Suddenly, the girl stopped, surprised by what she saw. She couldn't believe her eyes. The same guy was once again passionately kissing another girl in the middle of the university courtyard. Did he really think of himself as the best, behaving so unfairly with girls? But why did they agree to such treatment? She couldn't understand. Even from a distance, it was embarrassing to watch. Let alone their shameless behavior in public, they paid no attention to anyone and continued kissing each other. Ehan had a negative attitude toward this, as her mother had raised her in a completely different way. She stood still, unable to walk past due to her sense of shame. The guy noticed that Ehan was watching them. Without breaking the kiss, he seemed to be showing off his private life. There was pride and self-confidence in his gaze. He seemed proud of his actions, as if boasting about having different girls every day. The girl didn't want to be seen, but she couldn't leave quickly. Feeling embarrassed, she tried to cover her face with her hands. The guy didn't take his eyes off her. He made it clear that she was unwelcome and that it was time for her to go. The girl stood frozen, unable to move. She knew she needed to leave, but she couldn't take her eyes off them. There was a slight feeling of jealousy. She had never had such passionate kisses with her ex-boyfriend. It was still early, and there were almost no students near the university. Did he really like this? Maybe he had lost his mind from all the popularity among the female students. He kissed right in front of her, proud of his audacity to not hide his relationships with different girls. Today with one girl, yesterday evening with another. She noticed that he had a consistent type when it came to girls. He was some kind of strange guy who studied at their university. Why did no one pay attention to his behavior? And why weren't the professors reacting? He looked like a real hooligan. Despite his light hair, he dressed aggressively. His light-colored hair was long enough. And why was his skin so dark? Suddenly, the description of the guy from the post she had read yesterday resurfaced in her memory. The girl in the post had written that a guy with shoulder-length blonde hair and dark skin had helped her gather her things and walked her to the classroom. They even exchanged phone numbers, not because she asked, but because he offered. Then, a flood of comments followed, calling him a real playboy and trash. Ehan wondered, was the post really about him? And how could he do things like that? He did disgusting things so openly, though only she had seen it. It was still unpleasant and disgusting. She really didn't want to go to class, knowing that there would once again be strange looks and gossip about her past. Students were rushing to the university as there was little time left before classes started. But first, she needed to find out the schedule for today's lectures. She just wanted the classes to end quickly so she could go home. As she walked by, she overheard some boys talking. They said she looked quite normal. One of them was surprised and asked if the guy had seen the psychopath going around announcing it. The girl knew she just needed to leave, as she always acted this way when she didn't know what to do and felt uncomfortable. It seemed that someone from afar was shouting, "Watch out, the ball is coming." She had heard the word ball several times, so she casually looked back to see who the guy on the sports field was talking to. In a few seconds, the ball hit her in the head. She didn't even have time to react or dodge it. The impact from the ball knocked her glasses onto the ground. Why did she want to go unnoticed? Yet it always turned out the opposite. She found herself in absurd situations that attracted the attention of all the students. It must have hurt a lot. She heard comments around her. She felt extremely embarrassed and even considered taking another academic leave. The athletic guy who was practicing felt uncomfortable, not wanting to hit anyone walking by. She tried to get up, feeling unwell. Holding her hand to her face, she tried to find her glasses. With one hand, she tried to find her glasses nearby, but couldn't see them anywhere. Looking back, she noticed her glasses lying far away from her. She tried to cover her face and noticed someone trying to help her. A man's hand extended her broken glasses. Without them, she couldn't see the person who had decided to help her. Trying to see her savior, she thanked him for his help. She smiled at the guy. He said that without her glasses, her face looked very beautiful. He looked at her, smiling his disarming smile while she appeared helpless and shy. Thanking the guy, she, as usual, tried to leave quickly to avoid any unnecessary conversations. Nam Chang-woo stared at the girl. His friend smiled and was surprised, wondering if this girl had caught his interest. The blonde guy asked the same question. Perhaps he was jealous and he liked that girl. But the friend quickly denied it, saying that there was no reason for him to be interested in her. The blonde guy said he didn't see anything strange since the girl seemed cute. The friend was surprised, asking if he didn't know who the girl was. She was the one who had gone crazy over her ex-boyfriend. Could she have returned to her studies this year, hoping that all the gossip about her personal life had quieted down and been forgotten? Nam Chang-woo was surprised. Was it really her? He'd heard a little about her story, but he had never cared about gossip. The friend agreed that she actually looked quite attractive. He had been interested in her before, too. Nam Chang-woo said that the girl was cute, but not his type. The friend decided to tease him and said that the guy just couldn't pull her. The blonde guy got angry. To him, it sounded like a challenge. He remembered the shy girl who had looked at him with wide, round eyes. He thought it would be easy with her, and that he could make her fall for him quickly. After the incident with the glasses, they ran into each other in the university corridors almost after every class. During the classes, she noticed his glances in her direction, not understanding why such a guy would be interested in her. She felt uncomfortable, thinking that this guy was looking at her with judgment, as if everyone had already told him about her past life. Ehan remembered his words about how she looked cute without her glasses. But he really wasn't the type of guy she'd want to date. He had only pitied her because she was upset about her broken glasses. She kept telling herself that she shouldn't think about him since there could be no relationship with him. The girl hoped he hadn't recognized her. After that incident in the cafe when he approached her during lunch and asked why she was alone, she was so surprised that she almost choked, started coughing, and couldn't respond. The guy didn't know why she always got embarrassed whenever he spoke to her. When they met at the university, he always greeted her politely as if they had known each other for a long time. When he smiled while greeting her, as if he was happy to meet her, other boys seemed to mock him, laughing and having fun. Wherever she was, she always ran into him. It felt like he was following her, showing interest so she would fall for him or start to get jealous. When Yi-hyun met him, she tried to hide unnoticed and wait for him to pass by. And indeed, he was a jerk, again with another girl, not the one from last time. She felt uncomfortable meeting him. Did she really run into him again? She had to quickly avoid him, without even making eye contact. Nam Chang-woo walked by, and a pretty girl was holding his arm. Still, he casually looked at Ehan. The guy asked, could it be that she was skipping class too? Maybe she lives nearby. The girl didn't wait for him to finish speaking and ran away. His companion noticed that they were exchanging strange glances, as if trying to show something to each other. She asked if he knew her. He replied that they had met at the university. They studied there together. Sometimes they had the chance to talk, but very rarely. A new day, one Yi-hyun didn't expect anything good from. She dreamed of finishing her studies quickly and never seeing these people again. In a rather bad mood, she had to go to class every day. She was wondering how it could be an early class 2 days in a row, probably because she had signed up for the wrong courses. She was very tired and barely walking, not even noticing what was in front of her. She didn't notice when she bumped into him again. Why was she so unlucky to meet him so early in the morning? Nam Chang-woo stood across from her, silently watching her. She felt awkward, lowering and raising her eyes. The girl tried to keep calm, but she wanted to run away again. She didn't know what to say to him. Just when he was about to say something to her, she quickly tried to walk away from him. The guy quickly reacted, knowing she might leave. He realized she always ran away when she felt uncomfortable. He grabbed her hand, squeezed it tightly so she couldn't pull away. Why was he doing this? Why did he want to talk to her when he had so many fans around him who wouldn't mind meeting him? She thought. The guy leaned toward her and asked why she was running away from him again and again. Ehan didn't want to look him in the eyes, so she turned her gaze away. She didn't even know what to answer, feeling lost as her mind completely shut down. She didn't know what to talk about, so she still tried to leave, slowly pulling her hand from his tight grip. But the guy just stood there looking at her, saying nothing. When she tried to pull her hand away, he held it firmly and didn't let go. She didn't know what to say to make him leave her alone. She wanted to ask why he was following her and forcing his company on her, but out of shyness, she stayed silent again. From the outside, it looked like a big boy had caught a little girl, and she was struggling to break free from him. Yi-hyun gathered herself and unexpectedly, even for herself, slapped him across the face and quickly tried to walk away. The guy was surprised, not knowing she was capable of that, as she had always been quiet and shy. But she managed to escape from him again. She just needed to focus on her studies and finish the semester with good grades. In every class, this guy sat next to her, trying to talk to her or simply watching her silently. He must have had something planned when he tried to befriend her. Because of his attention, she couldn't study peacefully. She got distracted and couldn't hear the lecturer. Today, their class was taught by a new professor. The guy next to her pretended to listen attentively, but from time to time, he glanced at Ehan. Everything was ruined, she thought, since they would have to see each other almost every day. There was no hope for peaceful studying. At first, she was shy, but then it started to really irritate her. Every time she tried to move to another seat, he was still close to her. No matter what the girl did, she always felt his gaze on her. It made her uncomfortable. She wanted to run away again, but she couldn't do that because she was in class. He noticed that the girl was daydreaming and wasn't paying attention to the lecturer. He didn't miss the chance to remind her of him, saying she needed to focus since the subject was important, and everything depended on a well-prepared exam. She didn't want him controlling her behavior and telling her what to do. She didn't want to hear him, see him, or talk to him. Nam Chang-woo enjoyed her reaction and couldn't do anything about it, so he kept flirting with her. Someone entered the classroom and the professor greeted him, calling him his assistant. She froze for a few minutes, staring at the man without breaking her gaze. It seemed like she wasn't even blinking. Kang Tae-ok, her ex. He greeted everyone, speaking with a trembling voice, saying he hoped for a very good semester. Is it true? Could it be that her ex would be helping the professor teach the class? Why was she so unlucky? It seemed like all hope for peaceful studying was lost. Kang Tae-ok. Could it really be him? She couldn't have been that unlucky. There would be no way to peacefully finish her course now. Yi-hyun rang out through the whole classroom. This was the worst class of her life. Unfortunately, her time to correct the situation had passed, and there was nothing more to be done. Reluctantly, she raised her hand and answered that she was present in the class. It felt like all the students were watching her, not taking their eyes off of her. Everyone expected her to react unusually to the situation, but she tried to act as if nothing had happened. Their eyes met, and it was incredibly hard to suppress the emotions that surged at that moment. Nam Chang-woo, sitting next to her, didn't understand why she looked so upset when the professor's assistant entered the room. He observed her reaction and tried to understand her actions. Was her past repeating itself, and everything that had been said about her was true? Their thoughts distracted them from hearing everything the professor and his assistant were saying. Hyun tried to calm her emotions and not show the other students that she was clearly disturbed and worried that she would have to see her ex at every class. They didn't even notice how quickly the two classes passed. The professor thanked everyone for their attention and allowed them to leave the classroom. After the lessons, the students were very hungry and were deciding where to go for lunch, as there were many cafes near the university. Yi-hyun was also hungry and planned to visit her favorite cafe. The blonde guy followed her and suggested they go to lunch together, to a small cafe at the intersection where they served delicious meals at reasonable prices. She had thought the classes would be worse, but they weren't as bad as she had imagined. She needed to learn how to separate personal life from work, like she used to. Although it was difficult, it was possible as long as she could confidently keep her emotions in check. Nam Chang-woo insisted on having lunch together and made it clear that she would have to agree to his proposal, as he wasn't going to back off. He had no friends in this class, so they would start going together from now on. She wasn't against it, right? The girl thought that he definitely wouldn't have any trouble making friends and couldn't understand why he kept following her everywhere. Ehan was irritated that he was so persistent and was allowing himself to, against her will, put his arm around her shoulder. She didn't understand why he thought they were friends, as she never allowed him to behave with her the way he did with other girls. So, she tried to remove his arm from her shoulder. When they left the classroom, she heard her ex calling her from behind. She pretended not to hear him and didn't even look back. Her body trembled, but she was sure that a conversation with her ex wouldn't bring anything good. She once again wanted to escape from the troubles, hide from everyone so no one could disturb her. Breaking free from the blonde guy's embrace, she quickly walked ahead. What was wrong again? He had tried to be polite and not make any awkward proposals. He realized that persistence in this situation was unnecessary. He glanced back and noticed that the professor's assistant was standing and watching Ehan. His expression was worried, and it seemed like something was bothering him. The man stood there hoping that she would change her mind and agree to talk to him. He didn't think she still felt hurt, as a lot of time had passed since their breakup. The blonde guy realized that there was something connecting these two in the past. He decided to follow the girl because he didn't want to leave her alone in such a state. Kang Taeok, watching this scene, wondered if there was some kind of relationship between those two. The cafe wasn't far, so they walked slowly, not in a hurry. The guy asked Ehan if she hadn't heard that the assistant was calling her. Why hadn't she reacted to him? Maybe he wanted to say something important. She told him not to pay attention, as it had nothing to do with him. By her facial expression, he understood that talking about it was painful and unpleasant for her. But he was curious to know the details of this story. He guessed that the assistant was her ex-boyfriend, and he must have hurt her deeply, which is why she was reacting so negatively towards him. She was irritated and bothered by his curiosity about her personal life. Did he really care, or did he want to learn the details to talk about them with other students? She even got angry and told him that it wasn't his business, that she wasn't going to open up and share her painful past with him. Her face showed that she was agitated. His reaction to her question was quite intense. He probably needed to support her and show empathy to win her affection. Her personal life had been the subject of discussion among students for a long time. She had worked hard to get through those difficult times, and she didn't want to relive the same emotions. He hadn't asked anything strange. Why was she angry at him? He simply suggested she talk about everything, as it might help her feel better and stop holding everything inside. She apologized but didn't try to explain. She said she was trying to forget everything and leave it in the past. Then she realized why she was constantly making excuses, even though she hadn't done anything wrong. She calmed down a bit and decided to ask him why he kept acting like he knew her and why he always spoke to her informally. "Aren't we acquainted?" the blonde guy asked. There were many situations where they had met, but they never had the chance to talk. But he really remembered her and was interested in her personality. After all, he had helped her find her broken glasses, and now they were going to class together, even knew each other's names. Wasn't that enough to consider themselves friends? She was surprised that he knew her name. But he said her name and mentioned that he had a very good memory. The blonde guy concluded that even though she showed her displeasure, she was still responding to him politely. Ehan paused for a moment. She realized she didn't know his name. She had met him many times on the street, and they had been in class together, but she never remembered his name. But how could she have known his name? She didn't have any friends who could have told her about him. His expression showed that he was surprised when she said she didn't know his name. He thought everyone at the university knew him, even the freshmen. Why did she feel guilty when she didn't know something? She was ashamed, but she wasn't owed anything to anyone. When the guy said his name, she indeed remembered hearing it when the professor took attendance during the class. The guy leaned very close to her and repeated his name several times. Nam Chang-woo. He repeated it several times, hoping she would finally remember him. She felt a little scared. Why was he coming so close to her, as if he were trying to intimidate her? He felt strange to her, and it was uncomfortable to interact with him. So, all this time, only he had considered them friends. This was getting too much. While they were walking, the guy kept talking, and she walked beside him without saying a word. Was she ignoring him and upset with him? Suddenly, he smirked and asked why she no longer wore glasses. Was it because he had said she looked really cute without them? She said that she didn't wear glasses, not because she looked cuter, but because they were broken and she had sent them for repair. While they were having lunch, the girl grew tired of Nam Chang-woo's constant questions. When the guy asked where she lived, in a dorm or renting an apartment, he offered to give her a ride if she was heading home. But at that moment, she ran away from him. She was walking home leisurely when she suddenly overheard a conversation between a couple passing by. A guy and a girl were walking towards her, and the girl was playfully asking how much he loved her. The guy pulled her close and sweetly purred that he loved her so much that words couldn't describe it. Her ex had also confessed his love to her, but it turned out that everything was a lie and insincerity. When kissing her, he was tender. His promises were empty and had nothing to do with their relationship. After all the sweet moments in their lives, he easily broke up with her, trading her for someone else. She looked at them and remembered her previous relationship, the time when she felt happy. Now, she only felt pain and despair. Her life had changed in a different direction. She had become more closed off and barely interacted with peers. But why was she remembering all the good moments of their love? Almost all the unpleasant things were barely remembered in her mind. She was almost home. She felt exhausted. Today's overwhelming encounters with her ex and the walk with Nam Chang-woo had drained her. She couldn't calm down. Everything irritated her. Finally, she was home, able to relax and not worry. Finally, she could open the university chat and read all the updates from the day's classes. It was already late, but she didn't feel like sleeping at all. She scrolled through her old photos, reminiscing about how happy she once was. This wasn't how she imagined her meeting with her ex after the breakup. She thought time would make it hurt less. But when he called her name in the lecture hall, her heart skipped a beat. When he ran after her to catch up, it started hurting again, just like before. All these memories troubled her soul. The time that was supposed to heal only paused the pain in her heart. She thought that when she was alone with no one bothering her, she would feel better. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Yi-hyun sat on her bed and realized that this couldn't go on. She had to start living a new life, one that would bring her only joy. She had to convince herself and her subconscious not to think about it. She got up from the bed and decided to take a walk before bed. She kept herself in check. She decided to go to the store, get some fresh air, and maybe, alone, she could think everything through and close that chapter forever. The girl put on a warm jacket because the evenings were chilly and she was ready to go outside. Before leaving, she saw an announcement in the university chat about a party to celebrate the start of the semester. Seeing the date, she realized it was today. Yi-hyun thought to herself that she wasn't planning to go there anyway. She headed to her favorite store, which was open at night. When she was in a bad mood, she needed something tasty to eat. Also, she hadn't had banana milk in a while, and it was really delicious. The young people were having fun in the evening. They were relaxing and drinking alcoholic beverages. It seemed like they were truly having fun, without any problems, and they knew how to not get upset over small things. She too needed to learn to approach troubles lightly and forget them quickly. She was walking and didn't notice how she bumped into an unfamiliar guy. Her cocktail accidentally spilled and spilled all over. The guy apologized, saying his friend had drunk too much and didn't see where he was going. Yi-hyun replied that it was fine and wanted to leave quickly. She noticed that her cocktail had spilled on the guy's clothes. The other guy said it was no big deal since they were at fault for bumping into her. She saw that the guy was drunk and didn't know what he was doing. She didn't understand what was wrong with her, why she always ended up in unpleasant situations. The drunk guy wanted trouble and behaved inappropriately. He yelled that if she spilled her drink on him, she should apologize properly to him. His friend tried to hold him back, saying it wasn't a big deal and that the girl should just walk past them quickly. Everything was fine. Ehan was scared, but she quickly agreed and walked in the other direction. But the drunk guy didn't intend to let her go that easily. He demanded an immediate apology from her. He grabbed her by the shoulder and roughly tried to stop her. She wanted someone would be able to stop him and she could leave peacefully. The guy grabbed her and demanded that she apologize properly. She tried to explain that she had already apologized, but it was his fault because he wasn't paying attention to where he was going and bumped into her. His friends tried to hold him back and pull him away from her, but he yelled that he couldn't hear anything, and she needed to speak clearly and loudly. His friends tried to hold him back and pull him away from her, but he yelled that he couldn't hear anything, and she needed to speak clearly and loudly. He took a lighter out of his pocket and threatened to throw it at the girl if she didn't apologize, but he missed and accidentally hit a nearby guy. The guy turned around and asked who the idiot was that did it. Nam Chang-woo asked why these drunk idiots don't know how to behave in society. Why do they always want trouble and find someone to pick on? He heard a familiar voice. The girl was shouting that she didn't mean to spill the cocktail on him. It happened by accident. She was innocent in this situation. To his surprise, he recognized the voice and turned his head. Yi-hyun was scared. Her eyes were full of tears. Couldn't she go outside without finding herself in unpleasant situations? He noticed the girl was crying and asked why she was sobbing. She kept apologizing, but no one was listening anymore. A voice was heard saying that this jerk should apologize to the girl quickly. Soon, Nam Chang-woo tried to calm the girl down and bought her a new cocktail. Why, whenever he sees her, does someone pick on her, causing trouble that upsets her? Every time she cries and he has to calm her down. She was about to cry again, as she was the type of person who cries even more when she's grateful. The guy didn't like comforting crying girls because he wasn't good at it and felt uncomfortable. Chang-woo repeated several times for her to stop crying. Yi-hyun tried to hold back, but it wasn't working. She continued to sob, tears running down her cheeks. She sat for a little while, and the tears stopped flowing as much from her eyes. Seeing that she had calmed down, the guy expressed his hope that she wouldn't cry anymore, and the girl smiled. Then he handed her his phone and asked her to enter her phone number since he hadn't had the chance to ask for it last time. For a moment, the guy hesitated, wondering if the girl would agree. She felt uncomfortable refusing him after he had saved her from the drunk thug. He even bought her a new banana cocktail. He was surprised, as he didn't think she would agree so quickly. Chang-woo was satisfied because their conversation was going well. She started to trust him more and was grateful for her rescue. Suddenly, the guy noticed that the assistant professor, who had been with them in class today, had appeared near them. The guy thought, just what we need. Hyun was already feeling down, and seeing him again would make her even more upset. Kang Tae-hyuk called out to the girl. Hyun was surprised because she didn't expect to run into him here. She didn't want him to see her in such a tearful state. So, their meeting was unpleasant for her. He felt uncomfortable seeing his ex-girlfriend with a new admirer. He didn't like seeing them together. In his eyes, the question arose. Why was she here and looking so tearful and distressed? She didn't want to show her face in such a state, so she grabbed Chang-woo's hand and pressed herself tightly against him. She held him so tightly that she was squeezing his hand. Why was he just standing there and not leaving? They had made it clear that his help wasn't needed and he was unnecessary. The guy realized he needed to help Ehan. It seemed that she wanted to show their relationship to her ex-boyfriend. The girl had never been in a situation where she didn't know what to do. Maybe she needed to run away again, like before. It was time to go home since she hadn't planned on staying out for so long. Ehan stood at the doorstep of her house when the guy suddenly took off his shoes and stepped inside. Unexpectedly for both of them, she stopped him and asked him to wait. He was surprised and asked why she wasn't coming in. Maybe with her behavior outside, she gave him the impression that she was open to a new relationship. But it wasn't like that. She had just run into her ex-boyfriend. She wasn't even sure what had come over her, but she grabbed the arm of the guy who was nearby. Her ex seemed to suspect something, and as he started to speak, Nam Chang-woo pretended everything was fine, and they were a happy couple. Her ex was surprised to see them together. Just as he was about to clarify, the guy quickly pulled her away. She wasn't sure if she should thank him, thinking he would just help her get away. But he had helped her often, so she decided to ask him. She didn't know how to begin, so she said she would be home soon. He helped her so much she was grateful, but there was no need for him to walk her all the way home. The guy was confused because he hadn't walked her home, he was just heading to his place. It turned out they lived in the same building. They didn't even know they were neighbors. It was strange they had never met at their place. The owner of the boarding house lived on the first floor. The second floor had rooms for male students, and the third floor had female rooms. She was shocked that this could even happen. Now she understood why she always saw him on the street, especially when he hung out with pretty girls. She stood at the doorstep of the house, unsure whether to cross the threshold. She really wanted to go inside, but she was shy, nervous that others might see her and judge her again. Nam Chang-woo said he was very tired and asked if she was just going to stand at the door or come in. Yi-hyun looked at the guy, a bit puzzled. Then the guy suddenly leaned against the doorframe, smiled, and asked if she was too shy to go inside because of him. The girl immediately blushed and didn't know how to respond to that. She decided that it might have been better if she had just gone to bed right away. That way, she wouldn't have found herself in such an awkward situation. Again, not knowing what to say, she just decided to thank him for not leaving her in a tough situation and helping her once more. Why did she always feel so awkward, shy, and unconfident in such unusual situations? Chang-woo saw her tense expression and wanted to support her, maybe lighten the mood with a joke. But she didn't understand his jokes and looked at him with confused eyes. Nam Chang-woo told her not to be so tense and asked if she was done with the apologies. Ehan thought that maybe just an apology wasn't enough for him, so she asked what else she could do. The guy smiled and said that he really liked her and hoped she felt the same about him. The girl couldn't believe that someone might like her, especially when she looked so pitiful and helpless. Why was he saying this to her? It was probably another one of his jokes to cheer her up, but it had the opposite effect. She felt even more embarrassed and ashamed. Seeing her expression, the guy tensed up and wondered why she thought she couldn't be liked by anyone other than her ex. Realizing that the girl was uncomfortable, he quickly said that he was just joking. Kang Se-yoon was Yi-hyun's neighbor. She was 24 years old. She went downstairs to get some water. "Oppa," she said angrily. She had warned him not to get close to Yi-hyun since he was hitting on every girl who moved into the building. That's why she was alone, and now the guy was starting again. Chang-woo reassured her that he wasn't flirting with the girl. He was just joking. The girl quickly tried to steer her neighbor away and said that today he had helped her, but tomorrow he would take advantage of her helplessness. She told her to just ignore the guy and not listen to his stories. Chang-woo simply remained silent, watching the girls. He knew that Kang Se-yoon was a bit hostile towards him. The girls went to the third floor to their room, and the blonde guy had no choice but to return to his place. The neighbor asked Ehan what lectures she had tomorrow. The girl replied that they were the same as today. Kang Se-yoon was happy because they would go to university together. They wished each other good night and went to bed. Ehan went to her room. There was a lot on her mind. She brought her night shopping home. She didn't feel like eating any of the treats she bought. She took off her outerwear, wanting to get to her bed quickly because she was exhausted from today's events. At the university, she felt uncomfortable because the students were talking about her past life. She used to feel peaceful at home, but now living with someone she didn't want to see was uncomfortable. Everything else seemed okay. She closed her eyes and prepared to sleep. Yi-hyun didn't notice how the morning came. She had to quickly get ready for university so she wouldn't be late. As planned, she and her neighbor headed to the university together. Unexpectedly, Chang-woo joined them. Kang Se-yoon didn't like that he was always following them. Why did he always walk behind them? The whole day, the girl spent between the two of them. Even in class, they sat on either side of her, and Kang Se-yoon praised the girl's handwriting, saying she had very neat notes. At the cafe, they went together as a group, and Yi-hyun silently listened to the chatter of the two young people. In the end, they even went home together. The constant company made Ehan feel uncomfortable, and she just wanted to be alone. Se-yoon asked if there was anything to eat at home, since going to all the classes was very exhausting. Chang-woo suggested the girls stop somewhere for a snack, but the neighbor didn't like it. She was annoyed that he was always with them. She suggested having a snack later, just the two of them. Ehan was very hungry, so she agreed to Guy's offer. She suggested they order a whole chicken and share it. They were walking down the street and didn't notice that a motorcyclist was speeding behind them. The guy saw that the girls were talking so enthusiastically, putting themselves in danger. Chang-woo hugged Ehan, protecting her from a reckless driver who sped past them very closely. The girl was extremely surprised by such an impulsive gesture. He enjoyed protecting the girl because she always ended up in ridiculous situations. Kang Se-yoon, seeing him hug the girl, shuddered. She said she hoped this wasn't just another one of his jokes and that he hadn't planned anything weird. Ehan felt uncomfortable because she had been inattentive again. The motorcycle had actually passed dangerously close to them. The day at the university passed without incident, so they returned home in a good mood. They decided to have dinner together, so Seon invited them to the table. Everything looked very delicious. An incredibly pleasant aroma filled the room. She sat and waited for Hyun and Appa. Where were they? Why were they taking so long to join dinner? Everything would be cold and tasteless. Ehan was in the bathroom when she heard the girl calling them to dinner. She heard the girl shouting from the kitchen that the chicken had arrived and was cooling down. After her bath, she felt great since wearing makeup all day had been hard for her. She was shocked, as she had never experienced something like this before in her life. Unexpectedly, she noticed that Chang-woo had entered her bathroom. In panic, she asked how he got onto the women's floor. He replied that the men's floor was under renovation. The owner of the boarding house allowed him to use the bathroom on the women's floor. Since she had already taken a bath, he could use it now without anyone else seeing him. Ehan was confused. The guy said that the chicken had been delivered and it was time to have dinner together. The girl tried to walk past the guy, quickly saying that she was just about to go downstairs. To her surprise, the guy moved in the same direction. When she tried to pass by him from the other side, he blocked her path again. This repeated several times. Why does he keep blocking her way when he himself asked her to leave the bathroom? Chanwoo smirked and asked what the problem was, why she wasn't leaving, since he wasn't blocking her way. His face clearly showed that he was enjoying the situation. The girl blushed, realizing how clearly he was flirting with her. She squinted and decided not to fall for his provocation. She suddenly leaned forward and tried to pass again. But no matter how hard she tried, the guy, with a smug smile, kept blocking her way and acted as if nothing was happening. After such failed attempts to leave, she was tired. Why was she acting so clumsily again? She gathered herself and was determined to leave the bathroom quickly, even if she had to push him aside. She took the risk and rushed toward the exit. Yi-hyun gritted her teeth as she squeezed past him. Trying to leave, she pressed herself against him, pushing him back. Feeling that she had finally escaped the bathroom, the girl felt relieved and happy. But in the next moment, Ehan clumsily pressed against the guy again, slipped on the slippery mat, and felt herself losing balance. She couldn't end the day peacefully. She had to bring more trouble upon herself again. There was a sound of groaning from pain and frustration. They were both on the floor. Hyun was holding her head, saying that it hurt from the impact. Ehan finally realized that she had fallen right onto the guy and was now sitting on top of him. Their faces were very close, and both of them stared at each other in shock. Chanwoo even liked it, as the girl had never been this close to him before. The girl looked at him with wide eyes, thinking she probably should get up, but she kept lying on top of him. The guy liked this angle of the girl. He looked at her figure, which was almost right in front of his face. Ehan followed his gaze and realized where he was looking. She felt uncomfortable because he was openly looking at her body. She immediately blushed from embarrassment but froze, unable to move, and just kept staring at the guy. She had never been this close to a stranger before. With every passing minute, her face grew redder. Chanwoo thought that the girl had always been against getting closer and had been shy about every touch. Yet here she was, lying on top of him, not in a hurry to get up. Ehan reflected on how, when the guy looked at her, she initially felt embarrassed. But then she started to like the focused attention he was giving her. Suddenly, the guy decided to break the silence and asked if things weren't progressing a little too fast between them. The girl stared at him in confusion while he calmly continued, saying that he knew many people nowadays preferred to get straight to the point. Chanwoo lifted himself up, wrapping his arms around the girl and pulling her closer. He smirked, looking into her eyes, and said that he hadn't expected things to progress this fast between them. Ehan remained silent, her heart pounding wildly from the feeling of his hands on her waist and how incredibly close his face was. Noticing her reaction, the guy enjoyed it. He tilted his head so that their lips were almost touching. Kang Se-eun was still waiting for them to come down for dinner. She didn't understand where they had gone, why they were taking so long. She couldn't wait anymore and decided to go call them personally. When she opened the bathroom door, she didn't expect to see this. It seemed she understood why they were late when she saw them so close together. Ehan immediately jumped away from the guy, while he sat silently on the floor, thinking that the roommate had shown up at the worst possible moment. Ehan wondered if her roommate's arrival had saved her from making another mistake. She could have gotten herself into trouble again because of an impulsive action. From that day on, she tried her best to avoid him. She believed that communicating with Chanwoo could interfere with her successful graduation from university. She needed to focus on her studies. Relationships would only distract her for now. The morning was sunny, though not very pleasant. Everyone was rushing in the morning. Chang-woo visited the girls' floor to find out where Yi-hyun was. The neighbor was currently reading a message from her, which said that she had left earlier because she had university matters. She apologized for leaving first and not letting them know, sending a funny emoji. Se-yoon irritably said that this was definitely because of Chang-woo. The guy put on an innocent expression and asked why she would think that. Today's class had ended. The teacher hadn't even had time to thank them for their good work when all the students rushed to leave the classroom, not even listening to him. Ehan enjoyed going to class alone, so after the lectures, she decided to take a walk by herself. The girl's first plan was to eat something delicious, so she decided to go to her favorite cafe and order some tasty dishes. Unexpectedly, her piece was interrupted by Chang-woo, who said from behind that he was going to order pork with rice too. While he was placing his order, he tried to talk to her, saying that their food preferences matched. While placing the order, he didn't even notice what Ehan was doing. He didn't want to get too close to her since she had been avoiding communication with him recently. While he was busy ordering, she quickly ran away from him. When he turned around, he realized he was talking to himself. It was hard for him because it was the first time he hadn't been able to win a girl's heart. The girl tried to run as far as possible so the guy wouldn't find her. In the end, she managed to disappear from his sight unnoticed. She was running so fast that she stopped to catch her breath. He had startled her. Where had he come from so unexpectedly? When she saw him, she remembered that evening when they had been so close. Her heart started pounding with excitement because, deep down, something was pulling her toward him. More and more, she found herself wondering what would have happened if Kang Se-yoon hadn't burst into the bathroom that night. Her mind told her not to let him get too close. He always tried to touch her. She was grateful to him for his help, but she needed to keep her distance. A phone call interrupted her thoughts. She was surprised when she saw who the message was from. She didn't even want to open it because she felt there was nothing interesting for her inside. But she still opened it, and she was right. Her ex-boyfriend suggested meeting at the university. Her answer to the suggestion had already been made in her mind. There was nothing to think about. She immediately knew she would decline his invitation to meet. Kang Tae-hyuk expected this kind of response from her, but still decided to give it a try. He hoped she would change her mind and agree to meet him. He decided to reply that if she changed her mind, he would gladly agree to meet her. After her solo walk, Ehan was busy with house chores. She couldn't avoid Chang-woo's company because recently he was always wandering the hallways, almost as if he were intentionally looking for a meeting with her. The girl was surprised when the guy suddenly brought up tutoring. Why did he suddenly come up with the idea? But indeed, the midterm exams were coming up soon, and they were still attending the same classes. He thought it would be useful for her to go over everything again. Ehan noticed that the guy looked very confident, as if she had already agreed to his proposal. She had already tutored friends in middle school. She had been tutoring for 3 years to pay for her education, and in high school, she tutored twin brothers. In fact, she had a lot of experience with tutoring, so she didn't see the need to do it again. Kang Se-yoon told her not to even think about agreeing to tutoring. She should just let him feed her the best food. But it wasn't about food. She just felt uncomfortable talking to Chang-woo. Moreover, she saw that he was openly flirting with her. Ehan decided to leave first and suggested to her friend to go to bed earlier since they needed to get up very early. She decided to leave first and suggested to her friend to go to bed earlier since they needed to get up very early. Then he bothered her every day, trying to convince her to tutor him after all. Why was he so sure that he would enjoy tutoring with her, considering she was very meticulous about her studies? Once he even cooked dinner with a note asking her to help him with his studies. Ehan was already fed up with his persistence. But Seon was thrilled. The meal was delicious and creative, and she wouldn't have refused to eat it. In the end, after endless requests, the girl couldn't take it anymore and agreed to be his tutor. Chang-woo was pleased that he had achieved his goal, but he warned her that if she agreed, there was no turning back. She always kept her word and saw things through to the end. In 3 weeks, the midterm exams would begin, so they had to start tutoring next Sunday. They could discuss the days and times in the chat. The girl quickly agreed, saying that she was in a hurry for her classes and had to go. Then, suddenly, she remembered that she had forgotten to say something. She turned around to call him, but noticed that he was too busy talking to some cute girls. The girls were talking about how well they had gotten home last time. Chang-woo asked them what they planned to do this evening. Ehan decided that in this situation, it was better to leave her conversation with him for a more convenient moment. The time had come when they had agreed to start studying together. It was 7 in the evening, and Ehan decided to prepare thoroughly for the first lesson with Chang-woo. An hour earlier, she had already prepared everything she needed for the lesson. She liked when everything was within reach, and there was no need to get distracted looking for the right materials. The wait was really hard because she was nervous. She couldn't figure out where to start the lesson because she had never had a student like Chang-woo before. She hadn't tutored seriously in a long time, so as the time for their meeting approached, she got even more nervous. She kept glancing at the clock every minute. There were still 50 minutes left, and she decided that she had a little time to rest. As promised, Chang-woo arrived on time, even a little earlier. It was the first time he was interested in arriving on time. He had never been able to do that before. When he entered the room and called Yi-hyun, she didn't respond. Tired of waiting, she fell asleep right on her textbooks. Yi-hyun was very exhausted, and the wait had been long, so she suddenly fell asleep. When she opened her eyes, she saw Chang-woo sitting across from her, watching her sweet sleep. He calmly looked at her, not even trying to wake her up. The girl got scared because he was supposed to wake her up, not just stare at her while she slept. They should have started their lesson a long time ago because she needed to figure out what his knowledge base was and where to start explaining. She understood that there was a lot of work ahead. After all, Chang-woo didn't take his studies very seriously, and his inattentiveness and wild lifestyle made it hard for him to learn well. She opened her notes from the very beginning. She glanced at the clock. It was already after 9 p.m. She became anxious that they would start the lesson too late. He should have woken her up earlier, not waited for her to sleep through. The guy said that he arrived on time, but when he called her, she didn't respond. So he had the idea to simply watch her sweet sleep and admire her innocent appearance. While she was sleeping, he had the opportunity to stay close to her. She wondered how long he had been watching her. She realized that when she was sleeping, she didn't look very attractive, sometimes even silly. Chang-woo flashed a charming smile and said that she looked so peaceful while sleeping that he felt sorry to wake her up. He suggested that she first fix her face because saliva was dripping from the corner of her mouth, and then she could ask him as many questions as she liked, to which he would happily respond. He liked it when she blushed. Yi-hyun turned her face away and quickly wiped the saliva from the corner of her mouth with her sweater sleeve. The girl felt uncomfortable because he had caught her in such a state, but the guy reassured her, saying that everything was fine now. The guy reminded her that today was the first day of tutoring, so they needed to get to work. He asked her when they would start their lesson. He noted that the first day of lessons was usually for introductions. People got to know each other better and established a working atmosphere. Ehan said that they had known each other long enough, so they would start the lesson right away. It was only 9:30 p.m., and she planned to study with him until 11 p.m. He hadn't thought she would approach her task so seriously and responsibly. Why was he stuck in thought? He needed to quickly sit next to her and start the lesson. Her determined attitude surprised the guy, but he liked it when she took things into her own hands and approached the task responsibly. She immediately began reading her notes aloud. The guy immediately noticed the beautiful handwriting of the girl, how neat everything was written. When Ehan was explaining the material to him in more detail, he just stared at her as if he didn't understand anything she was saying. It seemed like he wasn't even listening to her, but was thinking about something else. The girl blushed from his intense gaze and scolded him for being so distracted. She told him to focus on the lesson and stop flirting. She told him to focus on what she was explaining because it was very important, forming the foundation for the further material they would cover. She noted that he kept getting distracted. Didn't he think she noticed? He should listen carefully to what she was saying. Every time she asked if he understood, he would agree. But in reality, he didn't understand anything. It was 11 p.m. It was time to wrap up the lesson and go rest. The girl prepared a task for him to complete by Sunday, and by their next meeting, he had to finish it on time. After the girl left, Nam Chang-woo sighed and thought that they had really only focused on studying, although he doubted he would be able to hold back. He noticed how seriously she took it, thinking that she genuinely cared whether he understood the material. Didn't it matter to her what grades he would get in university? The next morning, they headed to the university together. Though Ehan didn't particularly enjoy his company, she had to agree. Chang-woo wanted to help the girl, offering to carry her bag to the university since her notes were very heavy. During a break between classes, Ehan met Chang-woo, who seemed to be in a good mood. He offered her a small chocolate bar, which she really liked. She stared at him in surprise, as he had never done such a thing before. Why was he suddenly showing her this endless kindness? She thanked him but refused the treat. She understood that due to his frequent flirting, she was starting to show antisocial tendencies. The guy persistently offered the chocolate, even insisting that she open it right now. She didn't like his insistence. She thought he couldn't open the chocolate himself and was offering her to open it for him. The guy, covering himself with his hands, said he was just joking because he truly wanted to treat her with sweets. A group of guys walking by called out to Chang-woo, asking why he was holding up and not joining them. The guy responded and said he would be there soon. Meanwhile, the girl stood there, watching him, not understanding why he was following her. Nam Chang-woo reached out to Yi-hyun and took her hand. He placed the chocolate on her palm and wished her a sweet appetite. He turned around and calmly walked away with the guys, heading off to his own business. Yi-hyun stood in the middle of the corridor, feeling embarrassed without understanding his intentions. She stayed standing in the corridor, holding the chocolate and staring at it. Unexpectedly, someone called her. The voice sent shivers down her spine because she recognized it well. Her ex-boyfriend was holding her hand, telling her to wait and not run away, as he just needed a minute to talk to her. She didn't want to stay with him for even a second longer, so she jerked her hand free and tried to walk away, pretending she hadn't seen him. She didn't understand how he could talk to her like this after the way he had treated her. Ehan clearly told him that she had nothing more to say to him and that she didn't want to hear his explanations at all. Kang Tae-hyuk tried to calm her down, seeing that she was very angry. She didn't like that he was trying to control her emotions, so she walked away from him. She remembered hearing similar things from him in the past when she demanded an explanation for why they had broken up. He also said she was too upset and that he couldn't talk to her in that atmosphere. She thought to herself, could it be that after all this time he hadn't changed even a little? After going through such experiences, she had been able to change drastically. Finally, Seon found her and was running through the corridor calling out to her. The girl wanted to talk to her about their club activities, and upon seeing the teaching assistant, she greeted him. Her friend took Ehan by the arm and reminded her that they were late for the club. They needed to hurry and not waste a single second. They said goodbye to the assistant and quickly went to the club. Her ex was disappointed, as once again he hadn't been able to talk to Ehan alone. The girls arrived at the room where the club was held. Her friend asked if Ehan was really planning to join the club. The girl agreed, but she had done so impulsively. All the club members would be very happy if she really joined them. When they opened the door and entered the room, she couldn't believe her eyes. She immediately noticed that she would not be bored there. Seyoon announced that Nam Chang-woo was also a member of the club. Noticing the smiling guy, the girl froze in place. Ehan sat with her head lowered, trying not to draw attention to herself and feeling awkward for ending up next to that guy again. He sat across from her, laughing cheerfully, and the girl had no idea that he was only there in the hope of seeing her. Finally, the guy noticed her lingering gaze and turned to look in her direction. He smiled and, trying to find Ehan's eyes hidden beneath the brim of her cap, asked gently, "What was wrong?" She immediately turned away, hiding her face that was burning with embarrassment. Chang-woo smirked smugly. Seon-jin-ah, the head of the film club, cheerfully announced that the meeting was over and that from now on, they would be gathering every Thursday. Seyoon asked what they would be discussing at the next meeting and if there was anything they needed to prepare. The girl replied that they would vote to choose a movie, which they would then watch and analyze. She added that all the details would be shared in the group chat. Seon-eon sat quietly, lost in thought, feeling incredibly awkward. She didn't want to be part of this club, yet she knew she had to remain polite. When the meeting ended, Seyoon suddenly turned to her friend and asked how her tutoring were going. The girl blushed and replied that it was hard to say, since she wasn't a real teacher, but she hoped she was doing a decent job explaining the material. Her friend disagreed, saying that she thought Ehan was an excellent teacher. She then called out to Nam Chang-woo and asked if he enjoyed the lessons with her and if he was understanding the material well. The guy turned around and, after thinking for a moment, replied that she actually explains things well and that he understood everything. He mentioned that Ehan even gives him homework. His friend enthusiastically said that now she also wanted to attend her lessons. The girl was very pleased to hear such a compliment. The young people walked home, chatting happily. After their conversation, Ehan became inspired and prepared even more diligently for the next lesson with Chang-woo. So when he returned home and noticed the girl's determined attitude, he was even a little surprised. He had always approached their lessons with a laid-back attitude. But that day, as soon as he stepped through the door, the girl asked if he had done the homework she gave him and quickly told him to sit down. At first, the guy's works was full of mistakes, which the girl carefully went over with him. But after a couple of weeks of lessons, Ehan was quite pleased with their progress. Nam Chang-woo was handling all the assignments excellently. He habitually flirted with her, claiming that he deserved a reward for his success. The girl, as usual, blushed and became flustered, responding that he should focus on his studies. Finally, the day of the midterm exams arrived. After Ehan finished her work, she nervously glanced at Nam Chang-woo. The guy was focused on his assignment, and she couldn't see the expression on his face. She was anxious, wondering if he would manage to do well. Finally, the professor announced that everyone should submit their work. The students began to disperse, discussing who had done well and who might have struggled with the exam. Nam Chang-woo was about to leave when he felt someone tentatively touch his back. Turning around, he saw a flustered Yi-hyun standing in front of him, nervously asking how he had done on the exam. Looking into her innocent eyes, the guy put on a thoughtful expression and pretended to hesitate. He felt flattered by how much she cared about him and replied that, based on his own feelings, he thought he did pretty well. Ehan smiled brightly and said that she hoped he had done well. Of course, they had to wait for the results, but she hoped their extra lessons hadn't been in vain. Seeing that she was genuinely worried, Chang-woo placed his hand on her shoulder and reassured her that she explained the material really well and that everything would be fine. Noticing that the girl didn't flinch or pull away, he was even surprised. Usually, she kept her distance from him. But now, had he really managed to get closer to her? But then everything went back to normal. She awkwardly pulled away and said that they should wait for the exam results. Soon, the professor posted the list of grades and the students began discussing who had passed and what marks they had received on the exam. Hearing that Nam Chang-woo had received a B+, the girl's eyes lit up with joy. She couldn't believe that he had done so well. She walked happily, expressing how glad she was that their efforts hadn't been in vain. For the first time, he saw her so joyful and cute. A wide smile was shining on her face. Nam Chang-woo leaned toward her with a mischievous smile, saying that all of this was thanks to his amazing teacher, stretching out the words and looking at her. Ehan blushed at the praise and replied that he was the one who did well, as he had worked hard to learn the material. The guy suddenly looked at her intently and asked why she always addressed him so formally. After all, they were friends. She looked at him and asked how he would like her to address him. Chang-woo sighed and replied that he would be pleased if she called him Appa. Ehan quickly responded that she couldn't. After all, it felt too personal, and on top of that, she was older than him both in age and in her studies. The guy smiled and asked if that meant he should call her teacher. She blushed, realizing it was time to figure out what kind of relationship they had. One evening, the girl decided it was time to figure out her relationship with another guy who had suddenly reappeared in her life. She gathered her courage, looked Taeyok firmly in the eyes, and said that she didn't want him to try to contact her in any way. She explained that it made her uncomfortable when he tried to talk to her at the university and sent her text messages. It was unpleasant and unacceptable for her. Squeezing the cup in her hands, the girl confessed that she honestly didn't understand why he treated her this way, considering it was he who had betrayed and abandoned her. Kang Tae-hyuk calmly looked at the girl and replied that, yes, he was the one who had betrayed her. But so what? Hearing this, Ehan couldn't believe her ears. She asked again what he had just said. The guy repeated, saying that, yes, he had betrayed her, but who doesn't make mistakes? Bitterness rose in her throat, and she asked how he could say such things. The guy looked at her indifferently and replied that he wouldn't deny his guilt, as it was in the past. But he also believed that the girl had some responsibility for what happened. He said that back then she was somewhat distracted, but now it seemed like she had completely changed. Ehan listened, unable to believe that she had once been in love with this person. Taeyok said that back when they were together, whenever he asked her what she wanted, she never had her own opinion and always asked what he wanted. The girl tried to defend herself, replying that she had just been thinking about him, and that she truly enjoyed spending time with him. The guy calmly took a sip of his tea and said that this was the problem. He had gotten bored because she never showed any initiative. He leaned forward and said with a smile that now he noticed how fiercely she defended her opinions, how boldly she expressed her thoughts, and that he really liked how she had changed. He liked the person she had become now. Ehan stared at him in shock. How could he say such things? She had never been afraid to express her opinion. She remembered how, during their last meeting, she had asked him to go to the amusement park with her, but he had convinced her not to. arguing that it would take too much time and that he had exams coming up soon. And that wasn't an isolated incident. Every time her plans didn't align with Kang Tae-hyuk's, he always found excuses and reasons not to go along with them. And after everything, he dares to say something like that to her. The girl suddenly stood up from the table and quickly said that she had said everything she wanted to and that it was time for her to leave. Kang Tae-hyuk merely watched the departing girl with a detached gaze. Meanwhile, Yi-hyun left the cafe and then ran home, promising herself that she wouldn't cry over that jerk. The next day, the girl stayed in bed until noon, feeling emotionally drained. Though she had promised herself not to cry, her eyes were red and swollen. She grabbed her phone to check for notifications, but ended up dropping it on her face, letting out a small scream. It was Thursday, so the group gathered for the film club meeting. Se-yoon informed everyone that Ehan wouldn't be able to attend due to not feeling well. Hearing this, Chang-woo was both surprised and disappointed. He had been planning to attend the club meetings more often just to have a chance to see her. In the evening, Ehan finally left the house. She headed to the nearest diner and stayed there, drinking until she felt thoroughly intoxicated. Chang-woo lit a cigarette while texting a friend who invited him to go out for dinner together. He was about to leave for his meeting when, suddenly, he noticed the girl walking slowly down the street. She was walking slowly when, suddenly, she tripped. Before she could fall, she felt someone's hands on her shoulders, steadying her. Ehan felt strong hands and a warm chest that she was now leaning against. Lifting her gaze, she saw Nam Chang-woo, who was holding her steady, looking at her with concern. He said, "You should be more careful." She was surprised at how Chang-woo always seemed to be there when she got into trouble. Continuing to hold her by the shoulders, he guided her toward her house with a smile and asked why she hadn't shown up at the university or the film club meeting today. The girl sighed heavily and replied that it was none of his business. She asked him not to hug her, as she felt he was taking advantage of the situation, seeing that she had been drinking. Such a statement slightly hurt him, but he didn't pull his hands away, as he noticed that the girl was having a bit of trouble walking on her own. He looked down at her from his height and thought about how cute she was. He leaned closer to her, smiling, and began teasing her, asking if she really drank alone, saying she could have invited him to join her. Ehan finally snapped and shrugged off his hands, telling him to stop hugging her. The guy pulled back, thinking it was good that at least she was still in her mind, but it was clear something was bothering her. He couldn't help but wonder why she had gone off to drink alone all of a sudden. Then he looked at her intently and guessed what might be the reason behind her bad mood. He quietly asked, "Is it because of him?" The girl looked at him in confusion, wondering if he had guessed correctly. Chang-woo tried to appear relaxed, but in reality, he tensed up and asked if the girl had been drinking because of Kang Tae-hyuk. Deep down, he felt a pang of jealousy, thinking that whatever had been between them had long been over. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes again, and she hadn't expected him to be so perceptive. She walked ahead quickly, shouting that it was none of his business. The guy kept walking, his gaze never leaving her, thinking to himself that it seemed like he was right after all. He continued walking behind her, contemplating whether he should press her for answers or perhaps tease her to lighten the mood. Finally, he caught up with her and asked if she still hadn't let go of her feelings for him. Maybe it was time for her to stop dwelling on the past and start living her life. To his surprise, Ehan stopped and shouted that it wasn't like that at all. She had never been obsessed with her ex or fixated on him. She had only tried to be a good girlfriend, and he had deceived her. The guy could see that it hurt the girl to talk about it, and her tears made him regret pushing it on her. He decided to make up for the situation and, with a smirk, said that it seemed Kang Tae-hyuk was a bad guy. Hearing this, the girl froze. She was used to everyone always judging her and spreading rumors, and no one had ever tried to stand up for her before. Her tears started to dry, and she shyly looked at the guy. Nam Chang-woo asked if, instead of being in relationships where she's being led, she might try one where she could be the one leading. Suddenly, his fingers brushed against hers and intertwined with them. He smiled and said that if she wanted, he could help her with that. Then he leaned toward her and brought her hand up to gently touch her hand with a kiss. His eyes sparkled mischievously, and he asked what she thought of it. After a while, Chang-woo lay on the bed, looking at the girl with doubt. He wasn't sure if she fully realized what she was about to do. She took off her outerwear, and tears were still glistening in her eyes. He stopped her and asked if she had really thought it through, if she truly wanted this. The girl leaned over him and replied that he was the one who offered to help, asking if he had already changed his mind. There was a trace of desperation in her voice. The guy continued to hold her by the waist, letting out a heavy sigh, and said that he didn't want her to regret it later and start avoiding him. She whispered that she wouldn't regret it, and in the next moment kissed him, pressing herself closer to him. Chang-woo gently stroked her and kissed her back. It was a sunny morning, and a pleasant, fresh breeze was blowing through the open window. In a half-daze, Yi-hyun felt a pleasant scent and the warmth of a strong, firm body that she was pressed against. Then, she suddenly opened her eyes in horror, trying to figure out where she was and who was lying beside her in the same bed. She lifted her gaze and saw Chang-woo. His chest was peacefully heaving as the sunlight played on his golden skin. He looked incredibly attractive. Then it hit her what had happened between them, and she nearly screamed in horror. She had never made such impulsive decisions before. The girl quietly slipped out of bed and, quickly gathering herself, ran to her room, leaving the still sleeping guy alone. That day, classes started in the afternoon, so the girl quickly got ready and headed to the university. She crept down the hallway wearing a medical mask, not wanting anyone she knew to recognize her. When she reached the clubroom, she suddenly saw that Nam Chang-woo had also arrived for the meeting. His friends were asking where he had been yesterday, and the guy replied that he had been meeting with someone. She had hoped that he wouldn't be there today, but there was no avoiding it. So she entered the room and saw him happily smiling while chatting with his friends. Se-yoon immediately approached her, happy to see that she had come today. The moment she entered, the guy's attention shifted to her. It seemed like he was acting as if nothing had happened between them. Ehan blushed under his intense gaze and forced a tight smile. Suddenly, her friend asked if everything was okay with her. Ehan felt like she had been shocked, jumping in place, worried that it was obvious something had happened the previous night. She nervously replied that everything was fine. Her friend said she had been worried about her since Ehan had complained about not feeling well. Ehan let out a sigh of relief and replied that she was feeling better today. Chang-woo looked at the girl intently. He turned to her, about to say something, but she suddenly interrupted him and loudly asked the head of the film club what movie they would be watching next week. Seonjin-ah beamed with joy and said she was really glad to see Seon-Ehan being so active and engaged. She took the girl's hands in hers and said that if she wanted, she could choose which movie they would watch. Chang-woo stared at her in confusion, not understanding why she was suddenly acting so strangely and completely ignoring him. But the strangeness didn't end there. Later, when the guy was already home and walked into the kitchen, he saw Yi-hyun, who had come down to get a glass of water. He was just about to ask what her plans were for the evening, but in the very next second, the girl seemed to vanish into thin air, slipping away from him without saying a word. She collapsed face down onto her bed, completely drained. Embarrassment and fear washed over her in overwhelming waves. Her face burned with shame as she recalled everything that happened between them last night. His hands, his kisses. She didn't know how to look him in the eyes now, or how to behave around him. In her mind, the image of the guy from last night resurfaced, his strong, firm hands and his gentle embrace. Ehan dropped her head onto the pillow, thinking to herself that she must have just lost her mind. A few days passed, and Ehan continued to avoid the guy and completely ignore him. Chang-woo tried to talk to her, but she would immediately run away. His friend teased him, saying he still hadn't managed to win the girl's attention. The guy was confused. He thought that even though she had promised not to avoid him, they were right back to where they started. He had just been wondering what to do, since today was their tutoring day, when he received a message on his phone. The girl texted him saying she wouldn't be able to have their tutoring session today because she wasn't feeling well. That was the last straw. Nam Chang-woo was furious and had no intention of letting things slide just like that. Later that evening, the girl was sitting at her laptop, thinking that it was probably time to take a break and grab something to eat. She decided to head down to the kitchen to look for something to eat. But as soon as she opened the door to her room, she immediately bumped into a tall figure. Nam Chang-woo towered over her like a mountain, his eyes filled with anger. He had completely caught her off guard, leaving her no room to retreat. She couldn't gather her thoughts and began mumbling something about wanting to grab a bite to eat. Then she quickly asked if he was planning to have dinner too. He interrupted her, saying that she needed to stop running away from him and that they needed to talk. They entered the girl's room and sat across from each other. For a while, Chang-woo silently waited, expecting her to say something. But when she remained silent, he finally asked what was going on with her. Ehan stared at him in confusion, and he asked why she was avoiding him. The girl didn't know what to say, feeling embarrassed. She hadn't wanted to complicate her life, and now she didn't know what to do. The guy continued asking why she was avoiding him, even canceling their tutoring. He tiredly scratched his forehead and sighed, asking if it was really because they spent the night together. The girl quickly interrupted him, answering that it was exactly because of that. She confessed that she was avoiding him because of what had happened between them. Chang-woo stared at her in surprise, as he had thought that since she had wanted it, she wouldn't regret it later. But she didn't finish, and looking at him boldly, asked him to go out with her. Chang-woo was even more surprised and stared at her in confusion. He frowned and asked what she meant. They froze in awkward silence. Chang-woo broke the silence first and asked if she was being serious right now. She didn't know where to start. She was being honest with him. Rubbing her neck, she said she would stop avoiding him and continue their tutoring sessions, but in return, he had to fulfill her request. This surprised and intrigued him, and he asked what exactly she wanted from him. Without hesitation, she answered that she wanted him to pretend that they were dating. Such a turn of events surprised him and even bothered him. He squinted, observing her, wondering why not try a real relationship instead of pretending. Why should they be in a fake relationship, especially considering what had already happened between them? A lot of questions were swirling in his mind. Such a turn of events bruised his ego, so he crossed his arms over his chest and, smirking, asked why he should do that. Yi-hyun didn't expect a refusal and blushed, feeling like her request probably seemed silly to him. She tried to explain that he would get tutoring in exchange, and she would have the peaceful school life she had originally dreamed of. Then the guy sighed and agreed, but said that she had to explain why she was drinking alone that day. Ehan was taken aback, not really wanting to bring up the topic again. She puffed up her cheeks and replied that it was none of his business. The guy countered, asking why not, pointing out that wasn't it a mistake for her to spend the night with him while drunk? His voice carried both hurt and sarcasm. Since she didn't respond, he asked if it was true that she had been seeing Kang Taeyok and was obsessed with him. The girl immediately protested, shouting that she had already told him it was nothing like that. She froze when he smugly said that she still remembered everything from that evening. She realized she was caught and replied that it didn't mean she had to tell him everything. In the next moment, Nam Chang-woo smirked and replied that in that case, he was rejecting her offer. While Yi-hyun was in shock from his rejection, the guy smirked and said that she just wanted to have some fun night, but he wasn't that easy of man. The girl felt guilty and said that she would rather forget what had happened, as she usually didn't behave this way. Then the guy approached her and, looking intently into her eyes, asked, "In that case, is he a special person?" He didn't take his eyes off her and said that in that case, she should tell him what happened between her and her ex. If she wanted him to pretend to be her boyfriend, he had the right to know. Ehan remained silent for a few moments, thinking. She realized that there was truth in his words. She remembered the times when Nam Chang-woo had been there at the right moment, helping her and caring for her without asking any questions. Despite everything, maybe she could trust him after all. Finally, after a heavy sigh, she began her story. Chang-woo listened to her carefully, not interrupting and not missing a single word. When she finished, he decided to summarize, asking if he understood correctly. That her ex had cheated on her, then blamed her for it, and spread rumors that she was obsessed with him. She had to take a leave of absence because of the constant mockery. And now, 3 years later, he reappeared in her life and started harassing her again. By the end of her story, Yi-hyun was in tears, unable to respond, only nodding her head in agreement. She just wanted to finish her studies peacefully and didn't want to get involved in any more drama. The guy nervously laughed, his fists itching, as he longed to punch Taehyuk in the face. He only summarized that the guy turned out to be an even bigger piece of trash than he had originally thought. The girl wiped her tears and asked if they weren't close friends. Why did he have such an opinion of him? The guy looked at her and replied that they had never been friends. Their parents were close, but the two of them had never really gotten along. He then told her that he would help her, and the girl beamed with joy. She could hardly believe that Chang-woo had agreed to something like this. But then she drooped when she heard Chang-woo say that she needed to change her style, as he had never dated girls who dressed the way she did. He suggested she become more feminine. He leaned back, a smug smile playing on his lips as he continued, saying that she also needed to change the way she addressed him. He had already asked her before, and now that they would be in a relationship, she should call him Appa, or at least Sunbae. Realizing that there was some truth in his words and not wanting to argue, the girl reluctantly agreed. He also wanted her to act the same way with him when they were alone. But Yi-hyun was upset. After all, they were only pretending to be in a relationship. So why should she behave like that? Especially since they weren't that close. Chang-woo leaned closer to her, looking at her from beneath his brows, and asked with a hint of amusement in his voice if he should remind her in detail just how close they had been. The girl blushed deeply, her face turning bright red, and he innocently began. That night, unable to bear it any longer, she jumped up from her seat, her face burning with shame, and screamed for him to stop, insisting that she understood everything now. Chang-woo said that he had promised to help her that night and knew that she wanted to change, which is why she asked for his help. He didn't go back on his words, but in return, she had to listen to what he said. If she did, he promised her that she would achieve the desired result. He approached the girl, who was now in turmoil, and softly repeated that he would keep his promise and help her. The guy slowly and gently took her hands in his, letting her know that she could trust him. Yi-hyun felt the warmth and confidence in his hands. The girl looked up and met his eyes. He smiled at her and said he would take care of her. At those words, her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to freeze in that moment forever. The next morning, the girl was on her way to university when Chang-woo suddenly approached her, slipped his arm around her shoulders, gave her a charming smile, and said that they should walk together. Se-eun, who was walking beside them, looked at the guy in the strange way he was acting, then said that he really needed to stop bothering Ehan. But instead, the guy pulled the girl closer, leaned his head toward hers, and with a smile asked why he shouldn't do it. Especially now. Ehan was burning with embarrassment, while her friend looked at him in confusion and asked, "What do you mean, especially now?" Not giving the girl a chance to respond, Nam Chang-woo laughed cheerfully and said that they were dating now. Kang Se-eun froze in shock, as if she'd been struck by lightning. Her outrage knew no bounds. She couldn't believe it was true. The girl turned to Ehan and asked if the guy had forced her into dating him with threats. Ehan stood in the middle of the hallway, holding her breath. All she had ever wanted was to quietly finish her studies without drawing any attention. But instead, here she was, wrapped in the arms of the university's most notorious heartbreaker, who was gently kissing the top of her head under the watchful eyes of everyone around them. Nam Chang-woo flashed the girl a charming smile, clearly enjoying how adorably flustered she was. Around them, whispers buzzed. Wasn't he the guy people had been talking about in the university group chat recently? The one who never let a single girl slip by unnoticed? Ehan stared at him with wide eyes. When she suggested he pretend to be her boyfriend, she never imagined he would act like this in front of everyone. Now, they were the talk of the campus, and so began the story of their fake love. The guy continued to stand there, smiling at her sweetly, wanting to savor the moment a little longer. His gaze was so gentle that Yi-hyun lowered her head, embarrassed. She couldn't understand. Could he really be pretending this well? When they walked into the clubroom together, Seon Jin-ah exclaimed excitedly, saying she had heard the news that they'd started dating. While Ehan gave an awkward smile, a smug grin spread across Chang-woo's face. Her friend immediately began asking questions. How and when did it happen? After all, it always seemed like Ehan avoided guys. Panic rose in Ehan's chest. They hadn't prepared any kind of story for moments like this. But suddenly she felt a warm hand on her waist. The guy pulled her into a possessive embrace, holding her just a little closer. She was pleasantly surprised by how quickly and confidently he had come up with an answer. Then he rested his chin on the top of her head and, smiling sweetly, asked if what he said was true. To his surprise, the girl grew even more flustered, her cheeks and ears turning a deeper shade of red. She wasn't used to showing her feelings so openly, and on top of that, it scared her to admit, even to herself, that his touch felt good. Unable to handle the tension, she brushed his hand off and quickly rushed out of the room, muttering that they'd talk later. The class went on as usual, and the girl tried her best to focus on the lecture. Nam Chang-woo sat next to her, but to his annoyance, the girl didn't pay him any attention. Wanting to tease her a little, he slowly reached out his hand toward her. With one hand, he covered his mouth, chuckling quietly, while with the other, he took her hand, intertwining their fingers. Yi-hyun, not expecting this, looked at the satisfied boy in confusion. She blushed again, but when she saw Chang-woo smiling at her so sweetly, her heart started to beat faster. The guy sat there, content, holding her hand and pretending to listen to the lecturer attentively. She decided that she wouldn't pull her hand away. Meanwhile, Kang Tae-hyuk, who had been watching them, didn't take his eyes off them, clearly displeased by what he was seeing. The class had ended, and the girl was getting ready to head home when she felt the approach of the guy. Chan-woo quickly caught up to her and walked beside her. She leaned towards him and quietly asked why he was following her, since the class was over and they didn't have to spend time together all the time. But the guy simply smiled and, playfully throwing his arm over her shoulder, said that they were dating and he wanted to be with her as much as possible. Isn't that what couples do? But suddenly they heard whispers from behind. A group of young people was discussing how it seemed like these two were really dating after all. At first, she was calm because this was exactly what she had wanted. For everyone to think she was in a relationship and stop paying attention to her. But suddenly, she heard someone add, saying that she's the professor's ex, the one who had caused a real uproar last time, and now she was with a new man. Someone dropped that Nam Chang-woo also had a bad reputation and that he had picked up another girl again. They were discussing how these two even ended up together. Chan-woo heard the same as she did, so he didn't let the girl listen to the gossip behind their backs. He saw that Yi-hyun was uncomfortable and turned her face toward him, trying to distract her. He asked her not to drift off into her thoughts and then asked what she wanted for dinner. But the girl had already started thinking about what she had heard and couldn't gather her thoughts. She simply replied that she hadn't thought about dinner yet. The guy looked at her, concerned. He had expected that for a while the rumors about them would be the hot topic, but he hadn't thought that the girl would be so upset by it. The chatterbox behind them didn't stop, continuing to loudly discuss whether the two of them were suited for each other. Nam Chang-woo glanced over his shoulder and saw the guy with dark hair, who had already started to annoy him with his incessant talking. Without saying a word to the girl, he stepped away a little and loomed over the guy, giving him a fierce look. He then said that the guy's loud chatter was getting on his nerves. He noticed that the guy wasn't as brave when he saw him and, leaning over him, asked if he really thought anyone cared about his opinion, or if he was only bold when talking behind people's backs. He stepped on the guy's foot, glaring at him threateningly, and said that he was disgusted by people like him. The guy turned pale with fear and couldn't respond. Then Chan-woo returned to the girl, embraced her again, and as if nothing had happened, continued walking with her. Looking back, Ehan saw the guy clutching his foot, groaning in pain. She glanced at the guy and thought about how no one had ever stood up for her before, and how she had always tried to avoid conflict. For the first time in her life, she felt protected by someone. She admired how confident and straightforward Nam Chang-woo was. Thinking about how she too wanted to be like that, the girl began to blame herself for not even trying to do something about it. As if reading her thoughts, the guy leaned in and said that she shouldn't have done anything, and that she shouldn't pay attention to such trash at all. Ehan shyly looked down. Everything was written on her face. She replied that she didn't know how she should behave in such situations. The guy hugged her and, teasingly, said that if she wanted, she could go up to those people and say everything she thought, or just let him take care of it all. Laughing, he added that if needed, he'd deal with everyone. They walked along, laughing joyfully, and for the first time, the girl genuinely felt happy and protected. She smiled and told him not to say such nonsense. It was late in the evening, and a line of cars stretched out in a traffic jam. Kang Tae-hyuk gripped the steering wheel tightly and finally asked if it was true that she was dating Nam Chang-woo. Ehan sat in the passenger seat, maintaining a neutral expression on her face, and looked straight ahead. After maintaining silence for a while, she finally exhaled and replied that it was true. They were in a relationship. Surprised by her answer, Tae-hyuk asked if she really started dating him just to get back at him, wondering what she was hoping for. She didn't let him finish and, turning sharply, replied that no matter what he thought, it wasn't like that. She said that Nam Chang-woo liked her and she liked him, so they decided to be together. Besides, her personal life wasn't his business. The guy simply looked straight ahead and asked why they didn't go have dinner. She tightly gripped her seatbelt and firmly told him to stop the car. The girl had decided to talk to him one last time, but she no longer wanted anything to do with him. When the car parked by the side of the road, the girl got out, inhaling deeply, feeling a sense of relief. As she was leaving, she leaned down and asked him not to come pick her up at the university anymore, as she didn't want to stir up any more rumors. Throwing one last glance at him, the girl added that she had already told him she didn't want to communicate with him or have anything to do with him. Kang Tae-hyuk simply gave her a strange look, smirking, and told her to get home safely, adding that they would see each other again tomorrow. Then the car quickly drove off, leaving the girl in deep thought. She clenched her fists and thought about how tomorrow she didn't have classes, so they definitely wouldn't see each other, and what his last phrase meant. She was tired of his games and had no desire to continue communicating with him, so why couldn't he just leave her alone? Sighing heavily, she decided to just go home. But suddenly, she bumped into Nam Chang-woo, who had approached her. Her eyes widened in surprise. The guy watched the departing car and calmly asked if she had come in Taehyok's car. Looking at him, a moment from the past flashed in the girl's mind when she had found herself in a similar situation with her ex. Back then, Ehan had arrived at the meeting with Taehyok, chatting with her friend on the way. But the guy made a scene, saying he was busy and had waited for her for a long time while she was talking to her friend. He told her she was being rude and that she was hurting his feelings. Now she looked at Chan-woo and thought that maybe he was upset with her. When the guy said he had been waiting for her for quite a while, her heart skipped a beat. She asked if he was angry with her, but the guy just smiled and asked why he would be angry. He was simply worried about her, as it was already quite late and their house was in a dark alley. Then, in his usual manner, he draped his arm over her shoulder, smiling and asking what she wanted for dinner. Yi-hyun stared at him in surprise. She had thought he would be upset, like Taehyok. But instead, the guy was kind and concerned about her. She asked if he hadn't had dinner yet. Chan-woo was cheerful and replied that he had been waiting for her so they could have dinner together. She asked why, to which the guy teasingly answered, "Can a guy want to have dinner with his girlfriend?" Ehan grumbled that he was at it again, and the guy laughed merrily. They walked home, embracing and laughing happily. The next morning, the young couple headed to the university together once again. The guy noticed that the collar of her shirt was wrinkled and, touching it with his fingers, straightened it. A shiver ran down her spine, and she felt a wave of excitement, her face turning red. She froze, feeling his fingers gently brush against her neck. Chan-woo remained calm, though he noticed the blush on her cheeks and thought to himself that she really was so cute and modest. Not wanting to embarrass her any further, he walked ahead and teasingly remarked that she was even more clumsy than he had thought. Ehan merely ran her hand over the spot where his fingers had touched her, feeling a shiver run through her. After some time, the girl's lesson ended. She read a message from Chan-woo saying that he was waiting for her outside the classroom. She hurried out and started looking around, but couldn't see the guy among the stream of students. Suddenly, the girl found herself caught in a pair of large, warm hands that tightly wrapped around her waist. She felt a broad male chest against her back. Nam Chang-woo embraced her from behind and kissed the back of her neck, inhaling her scent. The closeness made her heart flutter. From the outside, they looked like a pretty cute couple. The girl grumbled and said he had scared her, but the guy, smiling cheerfully, said that he had warned her he was waiting. He continued to embrace her. Then they continued down the hallway, and the guy, as usual, put his arm around her, saying that next time he would give her a heads up in advance. The girl blushed again, but with each passing time, his presence and embraces became more familiar and pleasant. Evening came, and the young couple, strolling together, made their way home. They walked along, chatting cheerfully. The guy asked if she would come to the club meeting next week and whether they would have a tutoring. Ehan replied that, of course, she would hold a lesson with him, as the exam was coming up again soon. They decided to stop by a cafe, and the girl scolded him, telling him that he needed to be more focused in order to pass the exam. Suddenly, the girl froze in place, unable to believe what she was seeing. She saw a boy who looked strikingly like her brother, even wearing a similar high school uniform. Then, suddenly, the boy turned around and shouted loudly in greeting. It really was her younger brother, Ji-hyuk. Ehan froze in confusion, unable to understand how, and more importantly, why he suddenly showed up near her university. And so, after a while, the girl, her younger brother, her current fake boyfriend, and her ex-boyfriend found themselves sitting together at the same table in awkward silence. Ehan finally broke the silence and asked her brother how he ended up in this place. The boy looked at his sister intently and asked if she even checked her KakaoTalk. Taking her phone, the girl checked her messenger and was surprised to see a bunch of messages from her brother. He said he had texted and called her when he arrived at her university, but she hadn't responded. In the end, he wandered around until he ran into Kang Taehyok. Ehan felt guilty towards her brother when he suddenly asked who the guy next to her was. Chan-woo tensed up slightly, carefully observing the boy. He was curious to see what the girl would say. especially considering that her ex was sitting right in front of them. The girl sat trembling with fear, her vision even darkening. She didn't know what to do. In the next moment, Chang-woo leaned forward abruptly, smiling, and loudly declared that he was her boyfriend. Ji-hyuk stared at them as the meaning of the words slowly sank in. Then, in shock, he stared at them and yelled that he couldn't believe his ears. The young people were riding in Taehyuk's car when Ji-hyuk checked the time on his phone and realized it was too late to go back home. He said that since his sister lived in a dorm, he could stay with her. Yi-hyun hesitated, unsure of what to say, as she had purposely not told her family that she hadn't been assigned a room in the dorm. No one knew that she was renting a room in a house. Kang Tae-hyuk tried to suggest that the boy stay at his place, but suddenly he was interrupted by Chang-woo. The guy calmly leaned forward from the back seat and said that he could stay at their place, with him and his sister. The boy slowly turned his head back, shooting a fiery glare at his older sister, and angrily asked what he meant, saying, "To our place?" The girl realized that there was no way out now and that she would have to explain everything to her brother. How it happened that she was living under the same roof with Chang-woo. After hearing her out, her brother asked why she hadn't told him about it earlier. Ehan replied that everything was fine, and that the guest house where she rented a room was very cozy. Then the boy looked at her carefully and pointed at Nam Chang-woo, asking with suspicion if it was true that he was also renting a room there. Chang-woo looked at the younger brother of his fake girlfriend, unsure whether the boy was being prejudiced or if it was just a sign of concern for his sister. He stepped closer to him, grabbed his finger, and jokingly said that he wasn't just him, but her sister's boyfriend and his future brother-in-law, so the boy shouldn't treat him so disrespectfully. While Ji-hyuk anxiously asked his sister what nonsense the guy was talking and called him strange, the girl silently stood by, watching their playful banter. At this moment, Taehyuk watched the girl carefully. Thoughts of her and Nam Chang-woo swirled in his mind, leaving him uncertain of what to make of the situation. Noticing his intense gaze, she sincerely thanked him for looking after her younger brother. The guy smiled as the girl now looked exactly how he remembered her. Smirking, he turned around to leave. Then, to her surprise, he suddenly turned around and leaned toward her face. Noticing her bewilderment, he smiled and said that she should treat him to something next time. The girl stood there, not saying a word, unable to understand why he was acting so confidently with her again, flirting. He placed his hand on her shoulder and said goodbye, wishing her a good night. Taehyuk, pleased with himself for having flustered the girl, turned around and, smirking, waved at her, telling her not to stand outside and to go into the house. The girl wanted to remind him that she had asked him multiple times not to seek out meetings with her and not to bother her, but she didn't manage to get the words out. She ended up standing there, unable to summon the courage to respond more sharply than she had. She hoped she could still manage to avoid running into him. Meanwhile, Chang-woo was goofing off with her younger brother behind her, lightening the mood as if nothing unusual had happened. Night had fallen, and the young people were sitting in the living room deciding who should sleep in which room. Chang-woo didn't take his eyes off the boy and said that he should stay in his room since they were both guys. But Ji-hyuk didn't trust his sister's boyfriend and said he would sleep in the same room with her to protect her. They stared each other down, neither willing to back off. The girl sat there, clearly embarrassed. She had originally planned to spend the night at Se-yoon's place, but as luck would have it, Se-yoon had just messaged saying she wouldn't be home tonight. As the boys continued to argue, the tension Yi-hyun felt only kept growing. Suddenly, Chang-woo demanded that the boy return the clothes he had borrowed. Ji-hyuk couldn't believe his sister was dating someone so weird and petty. While the boy protested and asked his sister to do something about him, Chang-woo just laughed and kept insisting on getting his clothes back. She was stuck between the two arguing boys, unsure of what to do without hurting either of them. The tension was so overwhelming it felt like her head might explode. In the end, she found herself in a situation she never could have imagined under any circumstances. The warm breath of the guy gently tickled her cheek, but she couldn't close her eyes. Nam Chang-woo lay right next to her, and she could feel the warmth of his body, the peacefulness of his breathing. His face was only a few centimeters away from hers. The guy reached out and sleepily embraced the girl. Meanwhile, her heart was racing, and she desperately tried to make sense of how this situation had come to be. A couple of hours ago, the young people were sitting and arguing. Chang-woo asked if it was really so important for Ji-hyuk to sleep in the same room with his sister, as he was already an adult. In the next moment, the guy said that the boy could sleep in his room. Ji-hyuk wasn't satisfied with this option either and was about to protest. But Chang-woo calmly said that he would sleep on the couch in the living room himself. This option suited the boy. His sister would be safe and he wouldn't have to share a room with that strange guy. He stood up and said that, in that case, he would go to sleep. In the next moment, Yi-hyun felt her brother grab her hand and say that it was time for her to go to bed as well. Although he was younger, he confidently led his sister to her room to make sure she wouldn't be alone with Chang-woo. The girl appreciated her brother's concern, and it even amused her. She was glad to see him growing into a responsible young man. The boy told her that if anything happened, she should scream and call for him immediately. She smiled and asked what could possibly happen to her, since she was at home. But Ji-hyuk turned around and gave her a deadly look. The dangerous aura around him made it clear that he was serious, and Ehan realized it. She reassured him, saying that she would definitely call him if anything was needed. Nam Chang-woo calmly sat in the living room, watching as the boy escorted his sister to her room, firmly locked the door, and gave him one last threatening look before heading upstairs. The guy smirked, amused by how the schoolboy was so protective of his older sister. It was deep into the night, and Yi-hyun was peacefully sleeping, tucked under the blanket up to her nose. Suddenly, the door to her room opened and a male figure stepped inside. She was sleeping so soundly that she didn't even notice the bed next to her sagging as someone lay down beside her. Only when the person settled next to her did she groggily mumble in her sleep. Then the girl turned to the other side and, still half asleep, felt something touch her legs. She immediately opened her eyes, shaking off the sleep, and stared ahead, her heart racing. Her cheeks immediately flushed as Chang-woo's face was so close to hers. Sensing her discomfort and the intensity of her gaze, he murmured softly without opening his eyes, saying that he could no longer sleep on the sofa. His hands accidentally brushed against her, and she jumped in surprise. Ehan quickly said that in that case, she would go sleep on the sofa. She was about to get up when she felt the guy grab her wrist. She immediately stared anxiously at their hands, her throat going dry. The guy sat up and said that it was cold outside, and she could catch a cold sleeping on the sofa in the chilly room. Ehan blushed, feeling awkward being in the same bed with him at night. She protested, saying that she would be fine and there was no need for him to worry. Nam Chang-woo studied her intently, noticing how she blushed and seemed embarrassed, but he didn't want to let her go. He simply pulled her towards him, causing her to softly fall back onto the pillows. The guy said that he was so cold that he needed to warm up, and for that, he needed her. Otherwise, he would get sick. He hugged her like a stuffed toy, covering her with his large hand. Ehan felt the warmth radiating from him, and his breath brushed against her skin, sending a shiver of goosebumps all over her body. She became so unbearably awkward that she swallowed, the sound of it clearly audible in the stillness of the room. She froze, realizing she had revealed her nervousness. Chang-woo also paused, checking if everything was okay with her. At first, he was surprised, but then he smiled, charmed by how cute she was, even though she was older than him. She was so innocent and naive. Her reaction to him made his smile grow wider. Ehan felt her heart pounding against her chest, almost on the verge of tears from the overwhelming embarrassment. Even though they had grown close, the current situation was driving her crazy. She felt as the guy gently traced his fingers along her cheek, caressing it, and then his arms wrapped around her body. He wrapped her in the blanket and held her tightly, pressing her against him. He buried his nose in her neck and whispered that this way he definitely wouldn't get cold. He gently blew on her skin and felt her shiver, her skin covered in goosebumps. It amused him to tease her, and pleased with her reaction, he quietly smirked and rested his head on her shoulder, closing his eyes. But Ehan could no longer think of sleep. She stared at the ceiling while her thoughts raced in her mind. Hearing her accelerated heartbeat, the boy looked at her and noticed that she wasn't asleep. As if sensing it, the girl turned her head, and their gazes met in a silent conversation. She took a deep breath, and the guy reached for her lips. They were almost about to kiss when they suddenly pulled away from each other, hearing the sound of footsteps on the stairs. The guy and the girl anxiously looked at the door of the room, horrified, realizing that it would open any moment, and Ji-hyuk would catch them in such a compromising position. A few moments later, the sleepy boy opened the door, letting a bit of light into the room, and carefully looked around. Satisfied that his sister was peacefully sleeping, he quietly closed the door and left. Ehan's heart was racing, and she tried to remain still, hoping her brother would believe she was asleep, all while silently praying that he would just leave. Nam Chang-woo, meanwhile, hid under the blanket, still holding the girl around her waist. When they heard the door close, he quietly asked if her brother had left. The girl smiled, amused by how sweet he was acting at that moment, and replied that everything was clear. The next moment, he pulled the girl tighter against him, pulling her to him to finally kiss her. The next morning, Yi-hyun saw her brother off, wishing him a safe trip home. She also asked him not to tell their parents that she was living in a boarding house, promising that everything would be fine with her. Ji-hyuk sighed heavily and agreed, but then threw one last scrutinizing glance at his sister's boyfriend. While the sister hugged him goodbye, Chang-woo also observed them carefully, thinking to himself that although these two were siblings, they were completely different in character. The boy, noticing his scrutinizing gaze, angrily shot him a look in return. As a farewell, the girl waved to her brother. The guy standing next to her with a smirk on his face also waved at him and invited him to come over to visit. Yi-hyun realized they were once again alone. Se-eun hadn't returned yet, so they were completely by themselves, which made her feel embarrassed. Then Chang-woo suddenly pulled the girl into his arms, grinning mischievously as he said that her brother had left and now they were alone. He pulled her closer, whispering silly things into her ear, causing the girl to blush instantly. She tried to say something, but the guy just laughed, teasing her, clearly in a playful mood. But suddenly they heard Kang Se-eun's voice and turned around. The girl stood a few meters away from them, embarrassed that she had caught them in such an intimate moment, and asked why they were standing outside. They entered the house, discussing how the weather was gradually becoming warmer. Ehan walked behind the guy and suddenly called out to him. She wanted to talk about what had just happened because she felt awkward about Se-eun catching them at that moment. Chang-woo turned around with a self-satisfied smirk on his face and said that she should call him Appa, or Sunbae, reminding her that he had already told her that. Embarrassed, the girl swallowed and, looking at him uncertainly, asked him not to touch her so confidently in public and at least to warn her about what he was about to do. The guy listened to her carefully, analyzing her words. Then he smirked arrogantly and said that this meant he could touch her however he wanted, and as much as he wanted when they were alone. The girl blushed again from embarrassment and said that she didn't mean that at all. The guy laughed loudly and cheerfully. 2 weeks had passed since the young people entered their fake relationship, and everything was going very well. Ehan had become even more comfortable around the guy, and they were having a great time together. The only thing that bothered her was that Kang Tae-hyuk still occasionally wrote to her and tried to meet up. But on the other hand, everything was going very well with Nam Chang-woo. They communicated sweetly, and the guy surprised her with his sincerity and how attentive and kind he could be. Sometimes it even scared her because she was starting to get used to him. She was browsing through their conversation and couldn't help but smile at how cute the emojis he used were. She was so engrossed in her thoughts that suddenly she noticed that Chang-woo had sent a message. Since the chat was open, he saw that she had read it right away. The guy was chatting with his friends and joking around when he sent a message to Ehan. After checking his phone, he was surprised to see that she had read it right away, as if she had been waiting for him to message her. Smirking to himself, he threw away the cigarette and typed a new message. When he turned around and told his friends that he had to leave, the guys began whispering to each other, speculating that it seemed like he really was dating that girl and that the rumors weren't lying. After some time, Ehan arrived at the university only to be met with an unpleasant surprise. She froze upon encountering a stranger, a very beautiful girl. The girl looked at her confidently, crossing her arms over her chest, and declared that she was Nam Chang-woo's girlfriend. A group of young people entered the cafe and called out to Ehan several times to take their order, but the girl was lost in her thoughts. Finally, hearing her name, she turned around in surprise and realized she hadn't noticed the new customers. She was distracted because of something that had happened a few days earlier. That day, after class, a girl had approached her and introduced herself as Nam Chang-woo's girlfriend. Ehan froze in shock. She couldn't believe it was possible that he had agreed to pretend to be her boyfriend while having a real girlfriend. On the other hand, considering his reputation, it might have been possible. Saddened, she lowered her head, not knowing what to do. Meanwhile, the stranger was looking at Ehan with disdain, unable to believe that Chang-woo could have traded her for someone like this. A plain, mousy girl? Suddenly, Nam Chang-woo appeared, cheerfully addressing Ehan. He wanted to go home with her. Then he noticed she was standing with someone and looked closely, finally recognizing one of his acquaintances. The girl smiled brightly at the sight of him and ran toward him happily. She rushed past Ehan, who stared at her in surprise and shouted that she had missed him. She clung to his arm as if they were truly close. Nam Chang-woo, meanwhile, tried to remember her name but got it wrong. and the girl laughed and reminded him that her name was Yura. He felt awkward and tried to pull away. Yura, however, didn't let go and said she hadn't seen him in a long time and that it took her 3 months to find him. Nam Chang-woo asked why she had been looking for him and how she even found this place. He was uncomfortable with how familiar she was acting. Then he glanced at Yi-hyun, who was watching them closely, and realized how it all must look from the outside. He removed the girl's hands from him and said it was nice to see her, but he had to go. He gave Yura a cold look, walked past her, and told Ehan it was time to leave. But the girl didn't give up easily. She grabbed his hand again and said that all their friends were meeting at a cafe today, and he should come too, since they hadn't seen him in a while. Nam Chang-woo replied that it was only 5 p.m., and he could come closer to 7. Ehan kept silently and tensely watching this strange conversation. But Yura persisted, saying they could come earlier to spend more time with everyone, that many of his friends missed him. Then she cast a fleeting glance at Ehan, who stood beside him. She realized he didn't want to go now because of her. So she turned to Ehan, and with a feigned innocent tone, asked if she and Nam Chang-woo had any plans for the evening. Ehan blushed and only managed to say they didn't have any plans. She didn't have time to add that she still wanted to go home with him. But Yura immediately cut her off and said that if Ehan didn't mind, she would take Nam Chang-woo to the meeting early, and everyone would be happy to see him. Ehan was flustered. She hadn't finished speaking and didn't want things to come across this way. But the girl had already taken his arm again and was practically dragging him away, saying how much fun they'd have. However, Nam Chang-woo stopped, fell silent for a moment, then looked at Ehan attentively. He broke free from Yura's grip again, causing her to widen her eyes in shock, and walked toward Ehan. He gently took her hand and asked her to remember what he had told her in the beginning. He wasn't going to take his words back. He reminded her that in this relationship, she could take the initiative instead of going with the flow, and that he would help her become more confident. Now, holding her hand, he looked at her expectantly and said that if she told him she didn't want him to leave, he would stay with her. Ehan remembered that evening, but still couldn't bring herself to be selfish, even though she really did want him to stay. So she gently pulled her hand away and said she didn't mind him meeting friends he hadn't seen in a long time, and wished him a nice evening. Yura looked on with satisfaction, thinking what a simple girl Ehan was. The guy said he would try to return earlier. There was disappointment in his voice, but Ehan smiled and told him to have a good time. The sun was already setting as the girl walked home slowly, reflecting on what had happened. She realized it had been so long since she'd gone home alone that it felt strange. Then she wondered whether Yura really was Nam Chang-woo's girlfriend. Judging by the fact that he couldn't even remember her name, it was unlikely. She stopped in the middle of the street, clenched her fists, and scolded herself for once again lacking the courage to say what she felt or do what she wanted. And now she was torturing herself over it. She sadly thought about how pathetic she must seem to others and promised herself she would ask Nam Chang-woo that evening about his relationship with the girl. It was nearly midnight when the front door opened and the boy walked in. Nam Chang-woo was surprised to see Ehan sitting on the floor. Their eyes met and he asked why she wasn't asleep. Had she been waiting for him? The girl smiled and simply said she was worried and asked if he had drunk much. He sighed, sat down next to her, and replied that he hadn't drunk much but was tired. He noticed that she was staring at him, as if some question was spinning in her mind that she didn't dare ask. He saw she was shy and hesitant, so he asked her what she wanted to ask him. Ehan blushed immediately and tried to summon her courage. After all, it was just a question. But just as she was thinking, the boy's phone rang. He pulled it out to check, and she saw messages from Yura on the screen. A pang of jealousy hit her, and in the next moment she suddenly stood up and said that since he was home, she would go to bed. Nam Chang-woo was surprised by the sudden shift in her mood. He reached out to stop her, but she had already walked past and told him he should go to bed early too. Once in her room, Ehan fell onto the bed, burying her face in the pillow. She scolded herself for nearly coming across as clingy. After all, their relationship wasn't real, and she had no right to ask him such things. So for the next few days, she wandered around like a ghost, feeling down. Now, she was handing over another order on a tray. The girls who had ordered coffee quickly took it and left, because Ehyun's presence made them uneasy. Ehan looked very tired and upset. The constant thoughts and questions in her head were weighing her down. Because she couldn't stop thinking about Yura, she became distracted and started doing her job poorly, which is why she stayed late and missed the last bus home. She had just closed the cafe and was about to head home when she froze upon seeing a familiar face. It was her ex-boyfriend Kang Tae-hyuk, smiling warmly. He had been waiting for her after work. A few days earlier, Nam Chang-woo had been sitting with friends, finishing another beer, feeling bored and ready to head home. He kept checking his phone, hoping that Yi-hyun would message him, but she remained silent. Meanwhile, the persistent Yura, who had stuck by him all evening, was once again pestering him with questions. The boy gave her a cold stare, deciding that he had had enough. So he stood up and announced he was going home. His friends asked why he was leaving so early, but he said it was time and wished them a fun evening. Yura watched him closely and decided to follow him. She noticed he wasn't acting like usual today, and it was clearly because of that girl. Nam Chang-woo had already stepped outside when she caught up with him, saying she was glad they were walking together and that he'd walk her home. But he kept staring at his phone, as if waiting for something, and replied that he wasn't planning to walk her home. She was the one following him. Yura noticed that he had been texting a girl, asking if she was sleeping and if she wanted something tasty. It hurt her. Before she could say anything, the guy said his bus had already arrived, and without even saying goodbye, he got on it. Holding back tears of anger, the girl pulled out her phone and started typing something. Nam Chang-woo was worried that Ehan might already be asleep, so he quietly entered the house, but was surprised to see her sitting on the floor. Then he couldn't shake off the look in her eyes. She was clearly bothered by something and seemed curious about something. But just as he was about to talk to her about what was troubling her, he received a text from Yura, thanking him for walking her and asking him to call her. Seeing the message, he thought she was clearly not in her right mind. While he was still staring at his phone screen, Ehan suddenly got up and practically ran to her room. The guy watched her leave, confused, not understanding what came over her. The bag of snacks he had bought for her remained unopened. Now, Kang Tae-hyuk had waited for the girl after work and told her she missed the last bus, so he would give her a ride. But Ehan sharply replied that it made her uncomfortable when he did things like that, and asked him to leave. But the guy said it was already late and asked if he could at least take her to a stop where she could catch another bus to her home. The girl looked at him attentively, surprised by his offer. She had repeatedly told him she didn't want to stay in touch, and she couldn't understand why he kept trying to see her. Seeing her hesitate, Kang Tae-hyuk smiled and said it really was late, and that he just wanted to drive her to make sure nothing happened to her. As a result, they were driving to the nearest stop where the girl could catch a bus home. Suddenly, the guy asked if she really felt comfortable living under the same roof with Nam Chang-woo, since they were supposedly in a relationship, and asked if she was okay. Ehan was surprised by the question, and the guy said he knew she would stay silent even if she was uncomfortable, but she could confide in him. The girl got angry and once again said that she was fine, and that even if she weren't, they were no longer in a relationship where he had the right to ask such things. Kang Tae-hyuk noticed her discomfort and smiled, saying he knew her better than she thought, and knew she could endure discomfort and keep everything to herself. That's why he was worried. Then, out of the blue, he said he had seen some girl asking Nam Chang-woo out for a drink earlier that day. Ehan realized what he was trying to do. He had always been a good manipulator. So she unbuckled her seatbelt and said she would get out here and asked him to stop the car. The guy was surprised and asked why she was reacting so harshly to his words. He was just worried about her. But the girl replied that he was the one overreacting. As if he was jealous and wishing him well, she got out of the car. She didn't want to listen to him anymore, especially since she could get home from this stop anyway. So she hurried away. Soon, Ehan was on the bus, constantly checking her phone. She hoped Nam Chang-woo would message her. She bitterly thought how she was always the one waiting for something. She sighed heavily and thought she shouldn't even care whether he texted her or not, or whether he was going out with someone else. But for some reason, it still hurt deep inside. When she arrived, she got off the bus and headed home. Suddenly, her phone buzzed and she read messages from Nam Chang-woo. He was worried why she hadn't come home yet and was asking where she was. As she got closer, she saw him standing outside with a cigarette in his hand. Seeing her, he quickly put out the cigarette and threw away the butt. Then he turned around with a cheerful smile and walked toward her, saying she was finally back. Ehan froze, feeling warmth in her chest upon seeing him. What was he doing outside so late? Had he really come out just to meet her? The guy immediately pulled her into a familiar, casual hug and asked why she was out so late, saying he'd started to worry. The girl smiled and said she was just covering for a coworker. His phone buzzed again and he got distracted checking it. Ehan remembered that night and watched him closely, trying to see his reaction. Suddenly, she remembered those messages she had seen on his screen, and sadness overtook her again. She recalled Yura's behavior and the fact that she still hadn't figured out what kind of relationship they had. Sadness crept in again. She didn't want to be just another girl fooled by her own expectations. Nam Chang-woo looked up from his phone and noticed the girl's expression suddenly change. She lowered her gaze and brushed his hand off her shoulder. Then she suddenly walked off quickly, as if upset. He stood there in confusion. The girl stopped and simply said that he shouldn't go outside to smoke or he might catch a cold. Nam Chang-woo stared at her, bewildered, as she quickly went inside and left him alone. He didn't understand why the atmosphere between them had suddenly shifted so sharply. So he just stayed where he was, thinking that he had no idea what was going on in her head. Meanwhile, Yi-hyun was thinking that it had all started as a fake relationship, a made-up romance to keep things peaceful, and that they just needed to maintain some distance. Every time she saw him, saw his smile, her heart fluttered and she scolded herself for letting herself feel anything. Nam Chang-woo had noticed that the girl had changed recently. Why did she blush and close off every time she saw him? And now, the moment he looked at her, before he could even say anything, she was already gone. He didn't understand why they were back to where they started. Ehan had run outside and, holding her head, tried to catch her breath. Her heart was pounding and she didn't understand why she always looked for his gaze, why she always wanted to hear his voice. Suddenly, she saw Nam Chang-woo, who had apparently followed her, but he was once again stopped by Yura. That girl kept appearing around him. Every time Ehan heard her flirt with him and talk about things Ehan didn't understand, it made her chest tighten. She felt like she was losing her mind. She didn't want to feel these things, but she couldn't help herself. She wanted to scream from the despair. A few days later, Ehan came out of her room, checking her phone again. She kept expecting Nam Chang-woo to message her, even though he had no reason to. But still, she checked the chat. She kept telling herself that in a fake relationship, she shouldn't feel any of this. She went down to the kitchen looking for something to eat and approached the fridge. Because Nam Chang-woo constantly teased her, she had been trying to avoid him, while he had been trying to close the distance between them. And now suddenly she heard someone enter the house. It was Nam Chang-woo, just back from a run. His t-shirt was soaked and he headed to the kitchen, breathing heavily. Then, as if on purpose, he reached for the fridge, closing the distance between them as much as possible, and asked why she stayed home and didn't go out. Then he opened a bottle of water and drank greedily. Ehan, at that moment, could feel his heated chest against her back and realized she hadn't been avoiding him to push him away. Meanwhile, the guy noticed how unnaturally still she was, not responding to him. He leaned down and looked at her closely, finally noticing her quickened breathing and flushed cheeks and ears. With a burning face, Ehan realized she was in real trouble. His mere presence stirred her body and mind. He stood so close to her that she could feel his chest rise and fall with every breath. And for some reason, he wasn't backing away. Nam Chang-woo watched the girl carefully, unable to understand why she was so tense around him lately. Could it be that he made her nervous? He decided to test his guess, leaned toward her face and said she smelled really nice, asking if she had just taken a shower. Then he placed his hand on her shoulder and felt the girl flinch. She took his hand and gently moved it away, saying she had already showered earlier that morning. Though she tried to appear calm and composed, the boy could see her shoulders tense and her voice tremble. He smirked, thinking that maybe she was attracted to him but was somehow holding herself back, so he decided to test his theory. In the next moment, he pulled her into a light embrace, and with a smug smile, felt her hold her breath. Ehan looked up at him with a flushed face and quietly asked what he was doing. Pleased with her reaction, the guy smiled sweetly and reached for the fridge door, pressing her even closer as he replied that he just wanted to close the fridge. Then suddenly, the girl felt his large, strong arms wrap around her body as he leaned toward her neck, inhaling her scent. It made her skin tingle with goosebumps. One of his hands rested on her stomach, and Ehan felt like she was wrapped in a warm cocoon. Nam Chang-woo's voice became low as he asked what kind of shower gel she used, saying her scent was amazing. The girl tried to remove his hands and stammered that she'd text him the name later. She felt like prey a predator had decided to toy with. But no matter how much she tried to escape his embrace, the guy stood still and made no move to let her go. Finally, when he gently bit her ear, she couldn't take it anymore and told him to let her go immediately. But Nam Chang-woo calmly replied that he had no intention of doing so, and again breathed in her scent. Suddenly, they heard footsteps. It was Kang Se-eun quickly coming down the stairs. The pair froze in place, but the girl hurried past them so quickly it seemed she didn't notice them at all. The front door slammed loudly behind her as she rushed out. Then she suddenly realized that she might have caught a glimpse of someone in the kitchen, probably Yi-hyun. But she was in such a hurry that she hadn't even said goodbye. So, standing outside, she shouted to her neighbor that she wouldn't be sleeping at home tonight, and a moment later heard Ehan's voice responding that she understood. As soon as the girl replied to her friend, Nam Chang-woo immediately began pressing her against the fridge, moving in even closer. He leaned in, trying to kiss her while keeping a piercing gaze on her. But the girl felt awkward and tried in vain to stop him. She looked toward the door, afraid Kang Se-eun might come back suddenly, and asked him to wait just a minute. But the guy kissed her, pulled her closer, and said he'd only need a minute, then kissed her neck. Pulling away, he looked into her big eyes, and Ehan said that wasn't what she meant at all. She reached out, trying to hold him back, and asked why he always acted so overconfident. But he took her hands and placed them on his shoulders, then leaned toward her as if she were embracing him. Their eyes met. With a serious look, he said she liked it when he acted this way with her. And Ehan realized he was right. She liked being in his confident hands. Unlike her, it was easy for him to close the distance with people. She tried to protest, saying they were only supposed to pretend to be a couple in front of others. A smug grin spread across his face as he asked, "Is that so? Don't you worry about me or think about me when I'm not around?" Ehan knew she was caught and didn't know how to respond, because he was right. She blushed and looked away. What felt intimate and unfamiliar to her was routine to him. He easily got close to people and wasn't shy about physical contact. But in the next moment, the guy caught her chin, turned her face toward him, and kissed her firmly. And the girl melted into her emotions. Her hands instinctively wrapped around the back of his head, pulling him closer. She thought she always ended up yielding to his will. It was very dangerous to give in to emotions like this, so she gently pushed him away. Nam Chang-woo looked at her in confusion. Just a moment ago, everything had been perfect. Then the girl suddenly asked if he really believed he acted like a proper boyfriend. He asked what she meant, and Ehan replied that he constantly went out with random girls, flirted with them, and didn't care that people might start gossiping. Because of his behavior, Kang Tae-hyuk didn't take their relationship seriously. The girl said she'd asked him for help because she thought he had a lot of relationship experience. But judging by his actions, it seemed he'd never been in a real relationship and didn't even know what love was. Later, Nam Chang-woo lay in bed thinking about what she had said. Did she really believe he had no experience with relationships? A few days later, the situation became even more tense. New customers walked into the cafe. At the counter stood a broadly smiling Nam Chang-woo, behind whom Yi-hyun was hiding. A few days ago, the guy's phone rang late in the evening, and he reached for it. It was his older sister. She scolded him for spending too much money from her card this month. The guy sighed heavily and replied that he had been hanging out with friends frequently and had spent a little more than usual. His sister wasn't happy about his behavior and scolded him for not thinking about his future at his age and for being too careless. Since she was tired of it, she said that she was cutting off his access to her credit card and that now he would have to handle his own financial matters. Nam Chang-woo was confused. He got so angry with his sister that he said she didn't need to worry about him anymore and that he knew how to live on his own. He was about to hang up when he heard the girl's voice saying that he was starting to resemble their father. This hit a nerve, and he said it wasn't true. But she insisted that he had begun to act just like their father and that he needed to stop. The girl hung up and the guy sighed, thinking that he shouldn't have been rude to his sister. He sighed heavily and wondered if she would really stop helping him with money. Knowing her, he thought she wasn't joking, so he immediately opened a job listings website for side gigs. Suddenly, he saw an ad that the cafe where Ehan worked was hiring. He thought it was a lucky coincidence. It was a beautiful sunny day, and Ehan smiled as she arrived at work and greeted the manager. But then she froze when she saw a familiar figure behind the counter. Nam Chang-woo, for some reason, was wearing a work apron and talking to the manager. Hearing her, he turned around and, with a charming smile, greeted her. The woman was glad to see that the two knew each other, which meant it would be easy for them to work together. She asked Ehan to show and explain everything to their new employee. The girl was in shock and couldn't understand how it happened that the guy would now be working with her. They had been looking for another employee, but she couldn't have imagined it would be Nam Chang-woo. Later, she showed him how to take orders in the system and how to make coffee. To her surprise, the guy picked everything up quickly and served all the customers in a friendly manner. She watched him with a light smile, admiring how fast he adapted, as if he had been working there for days. Suddenly, the guy noticed that the girl hadn't taken her eyes off him and smiled. He winked at her and said that if she was going to stare at him all day, she could just take a picture of him with her phone. Ehan blushed and said that he misunderstood, that she was just paying attention to make sure he was doing everything correctly. But the guy walked over to her, grinning, and teased her, saying she was a little liar and that there was nothing to be embarrassed about. The girl's cheeks immediately turned red. Just then, new customers arrived and she told him to get back to work. Smiling, the girl greeted the customers. But when she saw who had entered, a chill ran down her spine and she froze. It was the couple who came 4 times a week, and every time they caused a scene in the cafe over some trivial issue. Ehan forced a smile, bracing herself for another dose of negativity. The guy asked for 1 chocolate latte and 1 Americano. Ehan asked if they wanted whipped cream, and the guy answered that they didn't. Ehan asked if they would take the coffee to go or sit down. She hoped they would ask for it to go. But the guy smiled and said they would drink the coffee there, then smirked and led his girlfriend to a table. Ehan was friendly, asked them to pay for the order and to wait a bit for their drinks. Soon, she brought their coffee on a tray. The girl was happy that the end of her shift was near and that she could finally rest. She was about to walk away when the guy stopped her and said that she brought them the wrong order. They asked for coffee with whipped cream. Ehan smiled politely and said she had asked them, and they had said they didn't want whipped cream. But the guy insisted that it was her mistake and told her to make new drinks for them. Deep down, the girl was prepared for something like this, so she just agreed to bring them new coffee. Nam Chang-woo, who was nearby, noticed the scene and saw how upset the girl was. He asked what had happened, and she replied that it was nothing unusual. She explained who the customers were and that it was better not to argue with them and just do what they wanted. Nam Chang-woo didn't like this and looked suspiciously at the troublesome couple. He decided he would make sure Ehan wouldn't have to apologize to them again. Soon, the girl placed the chocolate latte with whipped cream in front of the customers and wished them a pleasant time. But she froze when she heard the unpleasant voice of the guy. He was dissatisfied again, saying that he hadn't asked for so much whipped cream. Ehan realized she wouldn't be able to avoid a scene with them this time. Soon, the couple caused such a scene that all the other customers started looking around to see what was happening. The guy yelled that he hadn't asked for syrup on top of the whipped cream and that she didn't know how to make coffee properly. Ehan tried to explain, saying that it was the standard recipe for a chocolate latte that they made at the cafe. The girl apologized, thinking to herself that she just needed to endure this and soon she would be home. Meanwhile, the dissatisfied customer continued yelling and saying she was a terrible employee. Nam Chang-woo, passing by, sighed heavily and decided that the girl was again too shy to stand up for herself and say what she thought. So he decided to help her. He approached her and slammed his hand on the table. Yi-hyun was surprised he came over, as these were her customers, and she would have handled it herself. Meanwhile, the guy smirked and asked the disgruntled customer what he thought they should do now. Upon seeing Nam Chang-woo, the guy who was causing the scene quieted down and said they should just remove the whipped cream from the coffee. Nam Chang-woo carefully looked at the cup and thought for a moment. Then, to Yi-hyun's surprise, he took the cup. The girl thought he was going to make a new coffee. But in the next moment, she froze in shock as Nam Chang-woo took a large sip and ate all the whipped cream off the top of the coffee. Licking his lips, he handed it back to the customer and asked if the coffee was okay now. Guy and his girlfriend, clearly not expecting such a response, stared at him in fear and asked what he thought he was doing. Nam Chang-woo, keeping a carefree expression, said that they needed to clearly express their wishes because he didn't understand them. They didn't like coffee with whipped cream. They didn't like it without whipped cream. So what did they want? The dissatisfied guy was fuming with anger and asked why he was being treated this way. His girlfriend, holding onto his arm, nodded and said that it was wrong to treat customers like this. But Nam Chang-woo turned to Ehan and told her not to hold back and to say what she thought, not to tolerate rudeness. Noticing her confused look, he smiled and told her not to be afraid, because he would be there and support her. The girl blushed and wondered if she really could stand up to these rude customers. But then she gathered her courage and firmly said that even though they were customers, they needed to clearly state their wishes, and that they had to make sense. Only then would she serve them. The guy was already turning red with anger. He was furious because he couldn't humiliate helpless Ehan like usual. His girlfriend pouted and said it was humiliating and that they should leave the cafe. The incident was resolved, and by the end of the day, while washing the dishes, the girl thought about how she didn't have to tolerate abuse anymore, but could stand up for herself. Nam Chang-woo kept watching the girl and saw that she was very thoughtful. He approached her and tried to cheer her up, saying that the couple wouldn't be coming back, and if there were any problems, he would take full responsibility for what happened. The girl thanked him and thought about how she felt so calm when he was around. Finally, the workday ended and they were closing the cafe, ready to go home. The young people walked through the city at night when the guys suddenly said that Yi-hyun was completely different in temperament from her younger brother. He said that she shouldn't be shy about telling people what she thinks. The girl smiled and remembered that Ji-hyuk had told her the same thing. She said that her brother had always been like that since childhood, and then Nam Chang-woo asked if she gave him pocket money. The girl replied that she did, whenever possible. Then she shared that she had a twin sister, which greatly surprised the guy, as he had never heard about it. Ehan smiled and said that she supported herself and tried to help her sister and brother whenever she could. Nam Chang-woo listened thoughtfully and asked if all older sisters were the same. The girl was surprised and asked why he was asking, wondering if he also had an older sister. The guy replied that he had 2 older sisters and had had a quarrel with one of them recently. The girl was surprised, thinking he was an only child, and asked what had happened between them. Nam Chang-woo smiled and said that his sister had given him a lecture for behaving like a lazy person and had taken away access to her credit card. Ehan smiled in response and said that it seemed like he had a good and caring sister. She shared that her sister also shared her credit card with her. The guy listened to her and became interested in knowing more about her. He told her that, in fact, he only communicated with his older sister, while his relationship with the rest of his family was strained. Ehan sighed, unsure of what to say to that. It was the first time they were sharing such personal things with each other, and it turned out that she didn't know much about him. They walked home, chatting and sharing stories about themselves. When they reached her house, the guy said that he had decided something for himself. The girl asked what exactly, but he teased her, saying it was a secret and that she would find out later. Ehan lay in her bed, thinking about what she had learned about Nam Chang-woo today. She didn't know anything about his family, and it was surprising and pleasant that he had shared such personal information with her. It turned out that he was a more complex person than she had initially thought. She had always been so busy taking care of her siblings. It only further proved how different she was from this guy. But she couldn't understand why he had suddenly decided to tell her about it. The girl remembered how he had stood up for her today and decided that she would no longer think about Yura. What he had done for her and his decision to share such personal details meant that they had become much closer than she had thought. Morning came, and Ehan was awakened by a pleasant aroma tickling her nose. Rubbing her eyes and yawning widely, she went down to the kitchen to see what smelled so delicious. When she finally opened her eyes, she thought she was still dreaming, and everything happening around her was just a mirage. Kang Se-eun was sitting at the table full of delicious food, drooling, while Nam Chang-woo, wearing a pink apron with frills, stood at the stove. When he saw the girl, he smiled brightly and asked if she was hungry. Earlier that night, Nam Chang-woo was lying in bed thinking about the day they had and how they chatted on the way home. He was worried that he had gone too far by bringing up the subject of family, because he had never opened up like that to anyone before. He remembered the girl's expression. The conversation just flowed, and he hadn't realized how personal they'd gotten. Turned out, Yi-hyun had a much tougher life than he thought. She had to work hard to pay for college and cover her living expenses. Sighing heavily, he thought she probably saw him as a loser and a slacker. Then he suddenly remembered how slim and delicate the girl looked. She seemed so fragile. Nam Chang-woo worried if she was eating properly. He decided it was time for him to stop messing around and do something meaningful too. So the next morning, he decided to surprise Yi-hyun with a fancy breakfast spread. The girl stood there, mouth open, staring at all the dishes he'd made. When she tasted it, she couldn't hold back a pleased little moan, and her eyes sparkled. The food was amazing. Seeing her reaction, he smugly asked if she liked it, and she quickly assured him she never imagined he'd be so talented at cooking. Chang-woo replied shyly that he was quite good in the kitchen. In fact, he knew how to use YouTube and simply followed the recipe. Later that day, they started their tutoring session. Yi-hyun, looking bright and cheerful, put a big pile of notes in front of him. Seeing his worried face, she quickly told him he'd manage just fine since he actually learns pretty fast. Then she added that moving the lessons to an earlier time really was a good idea. When she said this gave her more free time in the evening, he stared at her seriously and asked if she'd like to go see a movie with him. Ehan was surprised, but didn't mind going to see the new premiere. After tutoring, they went to the cinema where the new movie had just come out. It was a melodrama called Rules of Trash. After the screening, Yi-hyun kept looking at the flyer, wondering why she still liked these kinds of movies. Nam Chang-woo noticed how thoughtful she looked, but politely stayed silent until the girl asked if he'd liked the movie. Putting his glass down, he said he did, and asked if she enjoyed it too. Still staring at the flyer and lost in thought, she answered that overall, she liked it too. After the cinema, they decided to grab some drinks and snacks. After another cocktail, Yi-hyun, cheeks flushed and mind a little hazy, kept glancing at the guy. Suddenly, thanks to the alcohol, she asked why Chang-woo was so comfortable talking to girls. He sighed heavily and asked why she brought that up. Did she think he was trash too after watching the movie? Hiccuping, she said it wasn't that, and she'd just always been curious, but he told her he wouldn't share. Then Ehan grabbed his arm and begged him to tell her, which made him a bit embarrassed. But he stood his ground and said instead of asking him that, why didn't she ask herself why she found it so hard to talk to people? All she had to do was not push away those trying to get close. She didn't seem to get what he meant and asked if she could really just talk to someone. Nam Chang-woo told her not to be afraid when someone tries to get to know her. He admitted he used to be closed off and insecure too. This surprised Ehan greatly, and while the guy took another sip, she asked if he had never made the first move before. He admitted she was right, and she stared at him silently, thinking. Then she suddenly said it seemed like Chang-woo just didn't know how to say no. Even if someone was being pushy and made him uncomfortable, he'd still agree. Her words really surprised him. Even though it was the first time they'd talked about this, it felt like she could see right through him. Still staring ahead, she added it must be hard for him always putting others first. She thought if he'd always behaved like that, it couldn't have been easy. Again, she surprised him, and he admitted he'd never thought about it that way. Meanwhile, Ehan rested her head on her hand, looked him in the eye, and said it must be tiring. After all, he was just a person who could get worn out by everyone else's demands. Not sure what to say, Chang-woo paused and then confessed that once a girlfriend had cheated on him too. Trying to act casual, he leaned back and told her his ex had been seeing someone else while still dating him. He said he'd treated it as an experience rather than a problem, but Yi-hyun cut him off and said it must have been hard. And there's nothing shameful about that. It was getting late outside, and Chang-woo didn't want to keep digging into it, so he suggested they head home since the buses would stop soon. The next day, Ehan felt awful. She didn't like getting drunk, but she'd overdone it and couldn't remember how much she'd had. Hearing the cafe doorbell, she forced a smile and got ready to serve the next customer. The girl was about to greet the visitor, but when she saw who had entered, she felt a lump in her throat. Yura walked in smiling. Ehan definitely hadn't expected to see her here. Ehan smiled and greeted her, still not understanding why this girl had come to her work. Then Yura looked around the cafe and asked if Chang-woo was here, and suddenly it all made sense. Ehan replied he'd stepped out for a smoke. Next moment, to her surprise, Yura stared right at Ehan and asked if she was right that he worked until 9 p.m. today. Ehan confirmed she was right. The whole situation scared her. How did this girl know Nam Chang-woo's schedule, and why was she following him? Meanwhile, Yura happily said she'd wait until closing since she wanted to take a walk with him, then ordered an iced Americano and carrot cake. Then she added that she was glad to find out Ehan was just Chang-woo's fake girlfriend, because that meant she wouldn't have any trouble with her. This really surprised Ehan, and she asked what that was supposed to mean. But Yura just laughed, said she'd wait for her order, and sat down at a table. Ehan kept staring at the girl, wondering if she really planned to sit in the cafe all day waiting for Chang-woo. Why was she so sure he'd go hang out with her anyway? Finally, closing time came. Seon, Ehan, and Nam Chang-woo were cleaning up and getting ready to head home. The girl glanced over at Yura, who, despite the cafe closing, was still sitting at her table waiting for him. Gathering her courage, she went up to Chang-woo and asked if he had plans to hang out with someone after work. The guy was surprised by her question and after saying no, asked why she was asking. She explained that Yura had been waiting for him in the cafe since noon. Chang-woo was really shocked, since Yura hadn't told him she wanted to see him, and even more surprised she knew where he worked. As soon as they closed the cafe, Yura rushed over, hugged him lightly, and invited him out for drinks, even offering to treat him. While the guy was still standing there, confused, Yura suddenly looked at the street and asked if that was Kang Tae-hyuk over there. And sure enough, Yi-hyun's ex-boyfriend was sitting in a car parked by the cafe, as if waiting for someone. Seeing her ex, Yi-hyun muttered under her breath, "What the hell is going on?" After all, she'd clearly told him last time she didn't want to see him anymore. Meanwhile, the guy got out of the car, walked over, smiled at her, and offered to drive her home since taking the bus wouldn't be convenient. But to everyone's surprise, Nam Chang-woo suddenly said it probably wouldn't be any more inconvenient than riding in a car with an ex. The air felt heavy with awkward silence. Ehan barely held back a laugh. Clearing her throat, she answered that she'd rather take the bus home. Meanwhile, Yura smiled at Chang-woo again and said Ehan really shouldn't get in a car with her ex, and that it was time for them to go to a bar and have fun. Completely ignoring Yura, Chang-woo walked over to Ehan, put his arm around her shoulders, and said that even if the car was more comfortable, since she wanted to take the bus, he'd go with her. Then he added that Kang Tae-hyuk was being too pushy and annoying. Didn't he see his behavior was upsetting Ehan? Looking over at Yura, he suggested Tae-hyuk could give her a ride home instead, while he and Ehan would go by bus. Leaving the two behind, the pair walked away. Tae-hyuk asked Yura if she wanted a lift, but she rudely turned him down. Meanwhile, Ehan and Chang-woo sat on the bus, staying silent for a while, both lost in thought. Finally, he broke the silence and admitted he hadn't expected her to turn down her ex and choose to ride the bus. The girl replied that she felt really uncomfortable around Kang Tae-hyuk, but he kept trying to meet her because he didn't believe in her relationship with Chang-woo. Chang-woo said that in that case, they had to do everything to convince him otherwise. Even after what happened at the cafe, Yura kept following Nam Chang-woo around, always trying to catch him at the university. And even though Kang Tae-hyuk didn't bother Ehan, she really didn't like how Yura kept flirting with Chang-woo. One day, Kang Se-eun couldn't take it anymore and told Ehan that they were completely unbearable. Ehan was surprised and asked what she meant. Se-eun blurted out, asking why her friend always kept quiet and said nothing to Yura or Chang-woo about how they kept flirting and hanging out. Didn't it bother her at all? Se-eun insisted that Ehan had to speak up, say clearly that she was Nam Chang-woo's girlfriend, and tell Yura to back off. She should also have a serious talk with her boyfriend and set some clear boundaries. After all, Chang-woo shouldn't just stand by and act so carefree. Meanwhile, Ehan had forgotten that they had a planned membership training trip that week. The day of the MT trip came, and the students crowded around the meeting spot, chatting excitedly and looking forward to the fun. Ehan was also happy and looked forward to spending time with Kang Se-eun. The coast was sunny, and a fresh, salty breeze was blowing in from the sea. When they arrived at the hotel, the girls were pleasantly surprised, since a lot of money had been spent on the trip and their department got an entire floor. Their rooms were next to each other, so Se-eun said they should sneak out for a walk at night, but Yi-hyun could barely hear her. She had just spotted Nam Chang-woo, who, like them, was looking for his room. The girl gave him a sweet smile since they hadn't had a chance to sit and chat on the bus. But to her surprise, he just turned away awkwardly and cleared his throat. It felt strange. Not wanting to think badly, Ehan decided to head to her room to unpack. Turning a corner at the hallway, she suddenly saw a man drop a big box full of plastic bottles. Without hesitation, she rushed over to help him pick them up. The man thanked her, saying his back hurt and the box was too heavy. He asked if she was a student, and Ehan said yes. She was here on an MT trip with her classmates. The next moment, the man handed her one of the bottles, saying he made the drink himself and asked her to accept it as thanks. Ehan tried to refuse, saying she hadn't done anything special, but he insisted, really grateful for her kindness. A bit later, the girls gathered in one room and discussed how they had free time after 5 p.m. Se-eun suggested going to the beach, and Ehan happily agreed. Then she noticed the bottle in her friend's hand and asked what it was. Barley tea? Ehan explained it was Yeongdam tea, which the man had given her for helping him. It tasted a little bitter, but she liked it. She offered some to Se-eun, but her friend declined, saying she preferred sweet tea. Some more time passed, and the group gathered in one of the rooms, drinking and having fun. Ehan did not drink alcohol, but for some reason she felt very dizzy and generally did not feel well. Deciding she couldn't take it anymore, she got up, swaying, and headed back to her room to get some rest. Noticing how strangely she was acting, Nam Chang-woo followed her and asked worriedly if she was okay. Maybe she had too much to drink? The girl smiled and answered that she hadn't drunk at all, but she felt sick and just wanted to rest. Chang-woo asked if he should bring her some medicine just in case. Yi-hyun said that would be great, and he told her to go rest in her room. He'd be there soon. The girl could barely walk down the hallway. Her legs felt weak and the corridor seemed to be swaying. Finally, she couldn't stand anymore, dropped to her knees and felt her vision blur. Ehan was scared. She hadn't done anything weird that day. So why did she suddenly feel so bad? Struggling back to her feet, she barely made it to her room and thought she needed to rest as soon as possible. She didn't notice the male figure lurking around the corner, speaking on the phone, saying his special drink had worked and the girl was definitely under its effect. Ehan lay down on the bed, still feeling the room spinning around her. Suddenly, she heard a quiet knock at the door. The girl opened her eyes slightly, thinking it was probably Chang-woo coming to check on her. She should get up and let him in. But to her surprise, after a moment, the door to her room opened by itself. The girl didn't have time to get up from the bed. Her eyes went wide. Just a few minutes earlier, the male figure had been approaching Ehyun's door. But suddenly, the man in a cap and mask stopped when he saw Nam Chang-woo walking down the hallway. He quickly turned and left. Meanwhile, Chang-woo watched the strange man with a thoughtful look. Entering Ehyun's room, he sat down on the edge of her bed. The surprised girl asked how he'd gotten in. He answered that the door wasn't locked, which was pretty careless of her. Still feeling dizzy, she said maybe the door just didn't fully close. Then Chang-woo handed her the medicine. Thanking him, she was about to wash it down with her tea, but the guy stopped her and asked what she had in her hand. Ehan told him about helping a stranger and that he'd given her the bottle to say thanks. Chang-woo then handed her a bottle of water and told her not to drink that tea anymore. After taking the medicine, the girl lay down and closed her eyes. Chang-woo settled into a chair by her bed, not wanting to leave her alone. Suddenly, he noticed a bruise on her ankle and leaned over to look at it, asking what happened. Ehan answered that she'd fallen in the hallway earlier. The girl gave a small laugh and said she'd always been a little clumsy. Night finally came, and the small town was lit only by street lamps and the lights from windows. Ehan didn't remember when she fell asleep, but woke up because of noise in the hallway. Some students had probably drunk too much. Rubbing her eyes, she saw Chang-woo still sitting next to her. She asked if she'd slept long, and he answered not really. It was only 11 p.m. Smiling, Ehan thanked him for helping her. After some medicine and a bit of sleep, she felt much better. Then she suddenly realized they were completely alone together in her room. Even though she felt better, now she started feeling nervous. Noticing her expression, a smug smile spread across Chang-woo's face, and he asked if she was really embarrassed just because they were alone. The girl blushed and stammered that it wasn't like that at all, but Chang-woo replied that he knew her and she always acted like that when she felt uncomfortable. Deciding to tease her, he stood up and walked closer. Ehan kept protesting, saying she wasn't acting like that. Leaning closer to her face, he suddenly said that even though he knew what was on her mind, he still couldn't figure out if she liked him or not. A tense silence hung between them, and Chang-woo's gaze dropped to her lips. In that moment, he really wanted to kiss her, and asked if he could do it. Could he kiss her? Hearing his question, Ehan blushed. Her heart started beating wildly, and she asked since when did he even ask permission before doing something. To her surprise, the guy got shy and answered that she'd told him before she didn't like when he just did things. So he decided to ask first. The girl was really surprised. Before he'd always been so confident, but now he seemed uncertain and was really asking her permission. She was just about to say yes, but suddenly heard some noise outside and got distracted. She had a strange feeling someone was watching them and asked if he'd heard something weird. But Chang-woo, now really close to her, said he hadn't heard anything and that there was nothing to worry about. Ehan got flustered and said she hadn't given him permission. So why was he leaning in? Already almost touching her lips, he whispered softly that her 3 seconds to decide were over. So now it was too late. They were just about to kiss when the door suddenly burst open and Kang Se-in walked in, smiling brightly and asking if Ehan was ready to go for a walk. The next second, she shouted loudly, scolding them and asking what on earth they were doing at such a respectable student trip. A bit later, Ehan was walking along the seaside promenade, breathing in the salty air and admiring the beach and scenery. The girl chuckled, remembering how Kang Se-in had sternly kicked Chang-woo out of her room, scolding them for shameless behavior. And even though nothing had really happened, Ehyun still felt embarrassed and cleared her throat. For some reason, she suddenly remembered all the times she'd caught Chang-woo in the arms of other girls. And even though he still sometimes acted strange and stubborn, lately he wasn't that bad. Ehan turned her face to the light breeze, thinking that it felt like she had stepped out of reality for a while, and she wanted to stay and rest like this a bit longer. Even though it was already midnight, the promenade was still full of people, even small children. Everyone around was smiling and listening to music. Walking past them, the girl thought this was probably what life looked like when you lived near the beach. Suddenly, among all the crowd, she noticed a figure dressed all in black. The figure was staring directly at her and looked very threatening. Ehan rubbed her eyes with her hand, thinking it must have been her imagination. Then she looked back into the crowd, but there was no one there. She could have sworn she saw Yura. Maybe it was just fatigue? But in reality, Yura, dressed all in black, hid behind a wall, watching the girl with a cold, arrogant gaze. The trip ended, and all the students returned to their usual university routine. Seon Ehan was sitting in class, tiredly resting her cheek on her palm. She felt distracted today. She was sitting next to Chang-woo, which didn't please Yura, who was sitting behind them. The girl was practically cursing her rival in her mind. Ehan couldn't understand how Yura even got into their class. Did the professor allow her to attend? Was she even a student at the same university? After the group trip, the girl felt even more uncomfortable, as if Yura was always watching her. How she always managed to appear somewhere nearby was a complete mystery. But unlike before, now Yura completely ignored her. She just kept staring in a strange way. After class, Nam Chang-woo suggested they have lunch together, but the girl was rushing to work because she was covering for another employee. Running off, she promised that they would definitely have dinner together. This behavior really surprised Chang-woo. She had avoided him before, but now it seemed like something was really bothering her. His thoughts were interrupted by Yura's voice as she smirked and suggested he could have lunch with her instead. Finally losing patience, the guy turned to her and firmly told her to listen carefully. He wasn't single, so he had no intention of accepting any of her offers. But the girl wouldn't stop and, almost obsessed, grabbed his hand and asked why he hadn't answered her calls. Chang-woo gently pulled his hand free and answered simply that it was because he'd blocked her. Turning to leave, he told her she needed to open her eyes and realize that he didn't want to see her anymore and should stop chasing after him. A bit later, the guy was lying on a bed at his friend's place, scrolling through social media. He found Seon Ehyun's profile and decided to follow her, thinking that if he asked her directly, she probably wouldn't tell him. Leaning back on the pillow, he suddenly wondered why Ehyun had never talked to him about Yura. After all, Yura's behavior obviously bothered her. He remembered the times when Yura would cling to him and flirt. Only now did he realize it might have upset Ehyun, even if they were just pretending to date. But why had she always stayed silent? The guy stared at the ceiling, thinking about it. Meanwhile, his friend asked what Chang-woo wanted for dinner. Chang-woo didn't seem to hear and kept talking to himself. He found it strange that Ehyun had never asked him about Yura. She wasn't usually shy about asking anything else. So why not this? His friend kept repeating that he was asking about dinner, but the guy had already gotten up and was still thinking aloud, saying he should ask her about it when he got home. As the guy walked out of the room, his friend just stared after him, unable to understand what the heck was going on, and who he'd even been talking to. Late evening came and the moon shone brightly in the sky. The dishes had been washed and were shining clean. Ehan, full and content, sighed happily and once again thanked Chang-woo for such a delicious dinner. She felt sorry that Seon had missed it. The girl praised him, saying he was simply an amazing cook, and he smiled proudly, saying there was nothing he couldn't do. While the girl was listening closely to the news, Chang-woo suddenly fixed his gaze on her, thinking it was the right moment to talk. Finally, he asked if it bothered her that Yura kept clinging to him and trying to flirt. The girl froze. Ehyun thought sadly that she'd be lying if she said she didn't care. She decided there was no point hiding her true feelings, so she admitted that Yura did bother her. The guy grew even more serious and asked why. If that was the case, she kept doing nothing and staying silent. He'd never seen anyone react like that. The girl nervously fidgeted with her fingers and answered that if they were actually dating for real, she would have said something. But since they had drawn that line from the start and agreed there would be no real feelings, she couldn't say anything. She simply didn't want to make her life harder by overthinking it. Chang-woo was really surprised by her answer. Did that mean she might actually have feelings for him? The guy wondered if she had just drawn another line between them right now. The next day, Nam Chang-woo went out to sit in a small restaurant with his friends. This restaurant was famous for its delicious rice soup, but because Chang-woo kept stepping out to smoke, his friends started discussing how strangely he'd been acting and how often he disappeared somewhere. Meanwhile, the guy couldn't stop replaying his recent conversation with Yi-hyun in his head. Her words about them drawing a clear line in their relationship kept bothering him. She had reminded him that from the very start, they had set boundaries about what kind of relationship it would be and that she didn't want to complicate things. Resting his chin on his hand, the guy murmured thoughtfully that it seemed like she really had drawn a firm line she wasn't planning to cross. Hearing this, Ehan grew worried and asked what he meant by that. But Chang-woo sat down next to her and said it didn't matter. He assured her that she shouldn't worry or get upset about Yura, because there had never been anything between them and there never would be. He told the girl that they had just started out with some light chatting, but Yura took it way too seriously and began bothering him, and after he blocked her, things only got worse. They hadn't even dated, and nothing ever happened between them, yet it felt like she had become obsessed with him. Yi-hyun simply replied that she understood, mentally noting that Yura had never been his ex or current girlfriend. Noticing the look on her face, Chang-woo moved closer and, resting his head on her shoulder, told her not to be jealous of Yura since he was happy to be with her right now. He asked her not to worry, hoping she would soften a bit. But suddenly he felt emptiness beside him. To his surprise, Ehan jumped to her feet, looking startled and far too serious. The guy tried to joke, saying that being so serious at a moment like this was kind of rude on her part. But the girl didn't listen any further. She just turned around and said she was going to bed, leaving him completely puzzled and alone. The next day, Yi-hyun was sitting in the library trying to focus on the book in her hands. She recalled Chan-woo's words about Yura and wondered if it meant that she herself was no different from Yura, and whether it should bother her. After all, their relationship wasn't supposed to involve feelings, yet for some reason, she felt awful now. Meanwhile, Nam Chang-woo had lunch with his friends, who were patting their full stomachs and chatting about how tasty and filling the meal had been. Suddenly, the guy froze, and one of his friends asked what was wrong with him today. He seemed completely out of it. But in the next moment, Chang-woo was already beside Ehan, who was coming back from class, immediately asking if she was free. His friend stared at him, whispering that it seemed this time he was really serious. Chang-woo then offered to carry her bag and suggested they go have lunch together. Suddenly, his friends came up and asked if Chang-woo was going with them to the internet cafe, to which he replied that they'd better go without him today. Hugging Ehan lightly, he smiled and said he hadn't had lunch yet, asking again if she'd mind eating together. His friends were surprised by his strange behavior, but figured they'd have fun on their own and left. Chang-woo asked what she'd like to eat, and she replied she'd be fine with anything, as long as it wasn't spicy, maybe something warm. The guy tensed up, silently hoping she wouldn't suggest rice soup. But in the next moment, Ehyun's face lit up happily, and she asked if he'd mind having rice soup. Chang-woo could barely believe the coincidence, and remembering how he'd just eaten it recently with his friends, asked if she really wanted that. Noticing his uneasy smile, the girl looked a bit disappointed and said maybe he didn't like it, and they could pick something else. But the guy hugged her and, now laughing, said that actually, he loved rice soup and suggested they hurry over. Suddenly, Yura brazenly slipped between them, grabbed his arm, and started talking about how if he had no plans for today, they could go hang out together. She kept chatting about inviting other friends if Chang-woo agreed. Chang-woo felt irritation spreading through him, thinking how annoying this girl was. He was about to tell her off when he suddenly heard a familiar voice. Ehan firmly declared that Chang-woo already had plans today. Yura, also taken aback, finally turned to the girl and asked what she meant. Ehan, who had decided it was time to change, looked steadily at the annoying girl and repeated that Chang-woo already had plans with her. Yura, confident in her charm, turned back and scoffed at Ehan. But the girl didn't stop there and continued, saying that since she and Chang-woo had plans, Yura would have to go her own way, alone. Besides, she thought it was too much how Yura kept showing up and bothering him. Yura, not expecting this turn of events, stared at the girl and asked by what right she was speaking to her like that. Who even was she? But Ehan cut her off, stating that she was Chang-woo's girlfriend, not Yura, and that it was time for her to back off. The girl felt that if she let Yura win this time too, she'd hate herself, so she finally said everything she thought. Meanwhile, Chang-woo proudly stood beside her. He hugged the girl and, smiling smugly, told Yura it looked like it was time for her to leave. Yura forced a nervous smile, adjusted her bag strap, and said in that case, she'd go. The two watched the girl as she left. And although she seemed defeated, Yura bit her lip nervously, deciding she wouldn't let go of Chang-woo that easily. Once Yura disappeared from view, Ehan looked as if all life had drained out of her. She was breathing heavily, overwhelmed by anxiety. Her heart was pounding wildly. Meanwhile, Chang-woo, pleased, asked if she was okay. The guy smiled and said that for someone who was so nervous now, she had looked really confident earlier. He was happy she had found the courage to speak up. A few days after the incident, Chang-woo reflected that Yura really had disappeared and couldn't believe things had resolved so easily. Since he was in the club room, the president asked how things were going with Ehan. Because of exams and stress, she hadn't kept up with the latest gossip. The guy chuckled and asked if exams had already started. The girl grumbled and replied that sometimes she felt bad that Ehan was dating him. What did she even see in him? She didn't say it out of malice. Ehan was just so sweet and kind, which didn't quite match Chang-woo's image or personality. Meanwhile, the guy checked his phone and suddenly saw that Yi-hyun had followed him on social media. He looked through her photos while the president continued talking about how sweetly Ehan got along with everyone and how cute she looked when blushing at Chang-woo's jokes. The guy thoughtfully agreed that Yi-hyun really was an absolute sweetheart. Meanwhile, Ehan was at work when she heard a notification come to her phone. The girl checked and saw that it was Chang-woo who had been liking her photos. A bit later, Yi-hyun was walking back from classes together with Se-yeon. She kept feeling as if someone else was around, like someone was constantly watching. Se-yeon asked if she was okay, and the girl replied that everything was fine. Later that evening, Yi-hyun was walking home. She was already close to her house, listening to music through her earphones. The girl didn't see that behind her, like a shadow someone was following. But again, she felt that unpleasant sensation as if someone was watching her, so she took out her earphones and quickly turned around. But there was only darkness and silence around. The girl thought she was imagining things because she'd been so sensitive lately. She turned back and was about to put her earphones in again when she suddenly heard a sharp movement behind her. Ehan spun around, but it was already too late. A sudden blow knocked the ground from under her feet. The girl fell to the ground, dropping all her belongings. From the shock, she couldn't focus her vision right away. Standing over her was Yura. She glared at Ehan and said everything had gone wrong because of her, and that no one else understood or suited Nam Chang-woo the way she did. Yura pulled something out of her pocket and started moving toward Yi-hyun. She angrily asked why Yi-hyun had suddenly shown up and ruined everything. Yi-hyun tried to calm her down, but Yura wouldn't listen and raised her hand to strike. In the next moment, someone grabbed Yi-hyun by the arm and pulled her sharply away from the attacker. It turned out to be a girl a little older than Yi-hyun. She shielded her and anxiously asked if she was okay. Ehan was trembling and couldn't understand what was happening and why Yura had suddenly decided to attack her. Yura, meanwhile, had been shoved aside by the girl and fell to the ground nearby. While the stranger helped Ehan stand up and asked if she was all right, Yura also got to her feet and, clutching a box cutter in her hand, muttered something about being the only one who should be next to Nam Chang-woo. The girls froze in fear, not expecting Yura to charge again. Yura, now completely unhinged, ran at them screaming that no one had the right to stand between her and Chang-woo. Fortunately, the stranger didn't panic. She ducked and grabbed Yura by the arm. Then she shifted her bag for a better grip and started defending herself, swinging it at the attacker. She hit Yura hard in the face with the bag, catching her completely off guard. Yura fell to the ground, dropping her weapon and sobbing loudly. Yi-hyun, frozen in shock, could neither speak nor move, just stood there with her mouth open. Meanwhile, the stranger stayed completely calm and quickly picked up the box cutter from the ground. Then she called the emergency number 112 and gave the address where the attack had happened. The police arrived very quickly and immediately put handcuffs on Yura, seating her in the police car. Ehan sat there as if in a trance until she heard the stranger's voice. The girl asked if she was okay and if she'd managed to calm down even a little. Ehan looked confused, but still thanked the girl for saving her. The girl suddenly took Ehyun's phone from her hand and saved her own number so Ehyun could call if anything happened again. Her name was Im Hee-soo. She smiled warmly and said it was time for her to leave. Ehyun thanked her once more and thought that this girl was really cool, and somehow felt strangely familiar. Meanwhile, Nam Chang-woo came out into the yard. He had heard the noise outside and was surprised to see a girl sitting on the ground near the house. Seeing Yi-hyun crying and frightened, he asked what had happened and why she hadn't called him earlier. Then suddenly he noticed the police lights and looked over in that direction. He saw Yura being led away in handcuffs and placed into the police car. Then the pieces in his head fell into place. Panicking, he grabbed Ehyun by the shoulders and started asking if she was hurt. Ehyun hurried to assure him she was fine and that someone had saved her. Meanwhile, around this corner, Kang Tae-yuk was hiding, having watched everything from the very beginning. Back home, Chan-woo kept scolding her for not calling or texting him that she'd finished work early. He could have come to meet her. The girl repeated again that she was fine and that everything had happened right by her house. Chang-woo blushed a bit and said he never imagined Yura had gone that insane. Clearing his throat, he apologized to Ehan for putting her in danger because of him. It was his fault she'd been exposed to danger. He felt responsible. He told her from now on she must always text or call him when she's on her way home. The girl sighed and replied that she was okay, then asked if it was really true he'd always be ready to meet her, even if it was 4 in the morning on a rainy day. Chang-woo was serious and answered that he'd come, even if there was a thunderstorm and lightning. A bit embarrassed, he said she could call him anytime for any reason, and it really touched Ehan. Meanwhile, at the police station, Yura was being questioned. They told her nothing would get resolved if she kept silent. The detective asked how she got information about Miss Ehan's schedule, how she knew her home address and even her relatives' phone numbers. Had she planned all this alone? But suddenly, Yura broke her silence and said that Kang Tae-hyuk had helped her with all of it. He'd provided all the necessary information and even suggested the idea of attacking Yi-hyun. 2 days later, Ehan was sitting at her laptop when her phone rang. It turned out to be the detective from the police station. The man called to say that during the investigation, it had been discovered that Yura had an accomplice. He asked if she knew someone named Kang Tae-hyuk because according to Yura, he had been directly involved. Hearing her ex's name, Ehan froze in shock. Yura confessed that it was Kang Tae-hyuk who had contacted her and told her that Ehan was getting in the way of Chang-woo starting a relationship with Yura, and that, in his opinion, Yura suited Chang-woo better than Ehan. The guy was sure they could be happy together. He said Yura just needed to be more confident and that Chang-woo definitely wouldn't reject her. He provided her with all the information about Ehan, even her daily schedule. Getting rid of Ehan became an obsession for Yura. The investigation showed that Yura was psychologically unstable, and it might be decided to send her for compulsory treatment. For now, she was issued a restraining order against approaching Ehan, but the detective warned that she should still be careful. Turning this information over and over in her mind, Ehan couldn't believe that Kang Tae-hyuk had been involved in all of this. In despair, she covered her face with her hands, trying to hold back tears. How could someone who had once seemed like her whole world be capable of something so awful? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of Nam Chang-woo. The guy knocked on the door and entered the room. The girl quickly took her hands from her face and, greeting him, asked how he was doing. He quickly replied that he was fine and asked if she herself was okay. He worried that she might have gone out alone, but she told him she hadn't left the house for 2 days. Chang-woo knelt down in front of her and asked if she'd received any calls from the police or any updates about her case. Ehan gave a tired smile and admitted that the detective had called her recently. She didn't know how to tell him everything. But Chang-woo watched her intently, genuinely worried, so she told him everything she'd learned. The next day at the university, Chang-woo was smoking when Kang Tae-hyuk approached him, smirking and saying he was surprised that Chang-woo had called him himself and asked to talk. Chang-woo asked if it was true that Tae-hyuk had pushed Yura to attack Ehan. Didn't he realize something truly terrible could have happened to her? Kang Tae-hyuk smiled and replied that he hadn't expected Yura to lose control like that. He'd just gently pushed her toward action, but he was glad everything ended okay and that Ehan was fine in the end. Hearing his words and seeing his attitude, real anger flared in Chang-woo. In an icy tone, he asked if Tae-hyuk had finished talking. Kang Tae-hyuk carelessly smiled and said that Chang-woo had never suited Ehan, that only he knew her well enough to be by her side. But the guy didn't have time to finish his sentence because in the next moment, Chang-woo's fist slammed into his jaw with stunning force. Meanwhile, Seon Ehan had just finished her classes and finally decided to text her savior, Im Hee-soo. She thanked the girl again for helping her and suggested they meet sometime that week. She was glad it was all over. The only thing left was to deal with Kang Tae-hyuk, because the truth had turned out to be even more shocking than she'd expected, and simply avoiding him wouldn't solve anything. Ehan wanted to cut off all contact with him, but suddenly the girl heard noise. In front of her stood a group of students filming something on their phones and cheering loudly. Coming closer, she couldn't believe her eyes and even screamed out loud from shock. Right in front of her, surrounded by a crowd, Chang-woo was fighting with Tae-hyuk, and Tae-hyuk was clearly getting beaten up. After a while, Chang-woo stood there looking at the floor, apparently upset. Ehan watched him with regret and mentally replayed what had happened just minutes before. Seeing the fight, the girl had rushed over without thinking and shouted loudly, asking what they thought they were doing. Flustered, Chang-woo tried to explain to Ehan that this bastard Kang Tae-hyuk had said awful things and after everything he'd done, he had to pay. But Tae-hyuk, taking advantage of the moment, slipped away. Chang-woo swore in frustration that Tae-hyuk had gotten away so easily, but suddenly the girl noticed some noise in the distance. Grabbing him tightly by the hand, she shouted anxiously that they had to run right now and dragged him away with all her strength. The students began to disperse, chatting excitedly about how cool it was that Chang-woo had punched assistant Kang Tae-hyuk. Security staff soon arrived at the scene, but found no one there. It seemed to have been a false alarm. Meanwhile, Yi-hyun managed to pull Chang-woo into the nearest empty classroom, where she tried to catch her breath after running. The guy looked at her and asked if she was okay. Irritated, the girl replied that she was fine, but asked what on earth he had done. Why had he started a fight in front of everyone? Chang-woo rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly and said that she had almost been hurt by Yura, and all because of Kang Tae-hyuk. It was Tae-hyuk who had planned everything, given Yura all the information and pushed her to do it. Ehan could have been seriously hurt, yet she still acted like nothing had happened. He just couldn't sit back and do nothing. Ehan sighed heavily and interrupted him, saying not everything should be solved with brute force. Would he really be okay if Tae-hyuk accused him of causing injury? Didn't he realize he himself could get hurt? Chang-woo lowered his gaze sadly and said he had only been thinking about her and wanted to protect her. In that moment, he looked like a fierce but hurt lion. The girl quickly assured him that she wasn't scolding him and that she was grateful he wanted to protect her. But if he kept getting into fights, people might start thinking badly of him. And worse, he could get hurt himself. Then she sat him down on a chair and said she needed to treat his wounds and apply medicine. After it was all over, many things changed. The rumors about Chang-woo gradually died down. They returned to their usual student life. As for Kang Tae-hyuk, after his true face was revealed, people began to look at him with suspicion. So he had to leave his assistant position and never bothered Yi-hyun again. Yura faced legal consequences and, because of her unstable mental state, had to undergo treatment in the hospital. Little by little, everything started to fall into place. It seemed time really could heal. Ehan went to the park at Kang Se-yeon's request. She needed to meet her friend's acquaintance and hand over some notes. She called her friend to say she was already there. Just at that moment, a handsome guy in jeans and a white shirt approached her, just like Se-yeon had described. The guy politely greeted her and said he was a friend of Se-yeon and had come to pick up the notes. Ehan immediately handed him what he came for, and then for a few moments the two of them silently looked at each other. Finally, the girl said that if that was all, she should get going. The guy politely bowed again, thanked her, and said goodbye. She was even surprised at how polite and pleasant he seemed. A few days later, while working at the cafe, Ehan heard the sound of the doorbell and automatically greeted the new customer. It turned out to be the same guy, Se-yeon's friend whom she'd met recently. Without looking up from his phone, he ordered a coffee. At first, it seemed like he didn't recognize her, but then he suddenly lifted his gaze and looked at her intently. Finally, he stared at her in surprise, as if finally realizing who she was, and Ehan smiled and greeted him again. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this video. Watching Ehan struggle to keep her distance, only to find herself drawn back into Chang-woo's gravity, is heartbreaking yet captivating. What hurts even more is the betrayal by someone she once trusted, proving that sometimes danger comes not from strangers but from the ones we used to love. Their relationship isn't simple or sweet. It's messy, raw, and tangled in fear and longing. But in those moments, like when Chang-woo swears to protect her even at 4 a.m. in a thunderstorm, you see just how deeply he cares. It's a story about how love can bloom again after heartbreak, how trust must be rebuilt, and how sometimes the heart still wants what logic tells us to avoid. If you've ever fallen for the wrong person or trusted someone who hurt you, you'll feel every painful, beautiful beat of this story. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this story and what manhwa you'd like to see next. See you in the next installment.